Good night, everyone. Tonight we will listen to the history of the Muslim conquest of Egypt and North Africa. Have you all brushed your teeth and washed your faces? If so, lie down comfortably, warm yourself by the fire I've prepared, and let's begin. Our story begins with a young Arab sitting on the slope of a hill, gazing out over the vast landscape that stretched before him. He was a man of keen intellect, quick to take in the details of his surroundings, with a sharp mind that matched the intensity of his restless eyes. His form was strong, broad-shouldered, with a presence that commanded attention. His journey had begun in the deserts of Arabia, a land that had shaped his strength and resilience. But his current thoughts were far from the arid sands of his homeland. The youth had travelled from Mecca, riding across the desert in a caravan laden with goods, his destination: Egypt. He was to cross the great desert to trade and gather the profits that would help sustain his people. The purpose of his journey was simple, but the circumstances surrounding it were far more intricate. It was a time when the power of Islam was on the rise, and this young Arab, though humble in appearance, carried within him the spirit of a growing force. Upon his arrival in Egypt, he was welcomed with the same hospitality that Arabs are known for, a hospitality that transcended simple generosity. He found himself in the midst of a strange and foreign land, surrounded by its vast monuments, its intricate cultures, and the colourful life of its people. But this was not just a passage through Egypt. This young man was about to meet the Egyptians who would become part of his destiny. As he travelled through the land, he met an Egyptian who approached him with a question that would change the course of his path. The Egyptian was curious, sceptical even, about the Arab's presence in the land. "Do you come to trade? Or are you here for something more?" the Egyptian asked. His words hinted at suspicion, as he wondered why an Arab, in the midst of such turbulent times, would come so far. The Arab in turn responded with a sense of pride and an unwavering resolve. He did not reveal the true purpose of his journey, nor the greater cause he served. Instead, he spoke of his humble beginnings, his travels, and his intentions to trade. Yet, the Egyptian's curiosity remained piqued. A brief exchange followed, one that would set the stage for further encounters in Egypt. The Egyptian questioned the Arab's intentions, and in his queries, the young Arab saw a glimpse of what lay ahead, a future in which Egypt, along with its people, would play a pivotal role in the unfolding story of the Muslim conquest. Not long after, the Arab made his way into Alexandria, a city known for its ancient grandeur and its strategic importance. The Egyptian had warned him that the city was not easily conquered, that its walls and fortresses were as tough as any in the world. Yet, despite these warnings, the Arab remained resolute, knowing that his mission extended far beyond trade. He reached out to the leaders of Alexandria, offering his goods and seeking a partnership that would benefit both his people and the Egyptians. But, as with all endeavours, his efforts were met with resistance. The Egyptians, while outwardly gracious, harboured their doubts, seeing the Arab as a foreigner, as a possible threat to their long-held traditions. In the following days, the young Arab's resolve would be tested. He witnessed the tensions between his people and the Egyptians, each side unsure of the other's true intentions. However, the Arab remained focused, knowing that his destiny was intertwined with Egypt, a land that had witnessed the rise and fall of many empires before. This chapter marks the beginning of a larger story, one that would stretch across the sands of Egypt and North Africa. The encounter between this young Arab and the Egyptians would serve as the foundation for what was to come. It was a moment of quiet reflection, one that would grow into a larger movement, the spread of Islam across these vast and ancient lands. The year was 639 Common Era, and Syria was struck by the plague. It spread with brutal efficiency, bringing with it devastation and loss. Amid the chaos, the commander of the Muslim army, Amr ibn al-As, found himself in a position that would test his loyalty, resolve, and understanding of the greater mission that was unfolding before him. Amr ibn al-As, a man known for his tactical brilliance and unwavering faith, had long understood the importance of Egypt. He had heard the rumours of its wealth, its strategic position, and its political turmoil. The call to take Egypt was clear, but there was something more that drove him, an undercurrent of destiny that seemed to beckon him toward the land of the Nile. But it wasn't Amr who first decided on Egypt. The decision, as with many others during this time, was in the hands of the Caliph, Umar ibn al-Khattab, the second Caliph of Islam. Umar, revered and feared for his leadership, was not a man quick to make decisions. He was a thinker, a man who weighed every action with great care. When Amr ibn al-As brought the proposal to Umar, the caliph hesitated. He was reluctant to send his forces so far from the heart of the Islamic Empire, worried that the campaign might weaken his own position. It wasn't that he doubted Amr's abilities, on the contrary, he trusted him. But the distance, the potential for failure, and the uncertainty of Egypt's political landscape weighed heavily on him. Umar's hesitation was a moment of indecision, but one that would not last. He sought counsel, not just from his commanders, but from those who had experience with the land of Egypt. It was clear to him that Egypt was ripe for the taking, and it was a land that could not remain in the hands of the Romans or their allies for long. The situation was changing rapidly, and if the Muslims were to expand, Egypt was an essential piece of the puzzle. It was during these deliberations that Umar received a letter from Amr ibn al-As, a letter that would ultimately change the course of history. In his letter, Amr emphasized the strategic importance of Egypt, the wealth it offered, and the fact that the Muslims could not afford to delay any longer. Amr's message was clear. Egypt was waiting to be conquered, and it was an opportunity the Muslims could not afford to miss. The caliph, moved by the urgency and the counsel of his trusted general, decided to act. He made the fateful decision to send Amr and his forces to Egypt, although not without reservations. He knew that this campaign could stretch the resources of the growing Muslim empire, and yet he also knew that the conquest of Egypt could change the course of the region forever. In a move that would define the trajectory of the Muslim empire, Umar ordered Amr to march toward Egypt. But this decision came with a sense of anxiety. Umar knew he was sending his forces into unknown territory, where the battle would not be easy, and the challenges would be many. The caliph's reluctance was evident in his actions, but so was his belief in the mission of Islam, in the righteousness of their cause. Amr ibn al-As, with his characteristic resolve, prepared for the campaign ahead. He had no illusions about the difficulty of the task before him, but his faith and strategic acumen drove him forward. With a determined force of soldiers, he set his sights on Egypt, knowing that the journey would test him in ways he had never anticipated. But for all the urgency of the mission, there was an undercurrent of caution as well. Amr, while resolute in his mission, knew that his success in Egypt depended not just on military strategy, but on his ability to navigate the complex political landscape of the land. The Egyptians were divided, and their allegiance to the Roman Empire was waning. Yet, there remained many within Egypt who were loyal to the Romans and would not easily accept foreign rule. Amr's first challenge came not in the form of armies, but in understanding the terrain, both physical and political, that lay ahead. As he crossed the desert, he encountered resistance not only from the Roman forces but from the Copts, the indigenous Christian population of Egypt. They were caught in the midst of this struggle, uncertain whether they should align themselves with the Muslims, whose faith they were unfamiliar with, or with the Romans, whom they had known for centuries. As Amr and his forces marched closer to Egypt, the Caliph, Umar, watched from Medina. His decision had been made, but he remained cautious. The success of this campaign was far from certain, and even with Amr's leadership, the challenges ahead were immense. Would the Muslims be able to secure Egypt, or would the resistance prove too strong? The first steps of the Muslim campaign in Egypt, marked by Amr's determined advance, were only the beginning. The true test would come as the armies neared the borders of the Nile, where the Roman and Egyptian forces were waiting. But even in his reluctance, Umar had made the right choice. The conquest of Egypt was about to begin, and with it the foundation for a new era in the region. As the sun rose over the desert horizon, casting its harsh light over the sand, Amr ibn al-As and his forces continued their journey toward Egypt, the land that would soon be at the heart of a monumental struggle. The long march had begun, and every step took them closer to the Nile, the lifeblood of Egypt. This was a land of great significance, not just for the Muslims, but for the entire region, and the task that lay ahead was nothing short of monumental. Amr had been charged with leading the Muslim forces to Egypt, and the challenge before him was not just military but strategic. The Egyptians, though under Roman rule, were not a unified people. The vastness of the country and the variety of its inhabitants made it difficult for anyone to command total control. As Amr and his army advanced, he understood that victory would require more than just martial strength. It would take a delicate balance of diplomacy and military strategy. The Muslims' march toward Egypt was not without its complications. The Roman forces, though stretched thin, were still formidable. The defensive lines were being prepared, and the soldiers stationed in Egypt had already heard of the Muslims' approach. Yet the Roman response was slow and disorganized, leaving the Egyptians vulnerable. Amr ibn al-As, with his sharp military mind, understood this well. His first objective was clear: to secure the path to Memphis, the ancient capital of Egypt. Memphis, strategically located along the Nile River, held immense significance both in terms of its history and its position as a key centre of Roman power in Egypt. Amr's army would have to march through the desert, overcoming both natural obstacles and the sporadic Roman resistance, before they could lay siege to the great city itself. The route to Memphis was long and treacherous. Amr's forces were constantly exposed to the elements, with little to shield them from the scorching sun and the harsh winds of the desert. Water and supplies were scarce, and the men were forced to endure the grueling journey with determination, knowing that the fate of Egypt lay ahead of them. Despite these hardships, Amr's leadership remained steadfast. His experience as a commander and his ability to motivate his troops played a critical role in keeping morale high throughout the journey. As they approached the outskirts of Memphis, the Muslims encountered the first major resistance. The Roman forces, though undermanned, had entrenched themselves in defensive positions around the city. Memphis was a well-fortified city, surrounded by walls and armed garrisons that would not easily fall. But the Romans had one disadvantage. Their forces were not prepared for the swift, mobile tactics of the Muslim army, who could strike quickly and retreat just as fast. Amr ibn al-As recognized that a direct assault on Memphis would result in heavy casualties. Instead, he employed a strategy that relied on surrounding the city and cutting off its supply lines. His forces moved swiftly, capturing surrounding villages and ensuring that no reinforcements or provisions could reach the Romans holed up inside the city. The siege of Memphis was thus set in motion, a methodical and patient process that would take its toll on the defenders, but not immediately. Inside the city, the Roman forces, led by the local commander, were aware of the growing threat. They tried to bolster their defences, but the psychological impact of being cut off from the rest of Egypt weighed heavily on them. The Roman soldiers, unaccustomed to prolonged sieges, began to grow restless. Supplies dwindled, morale faltered, and the Romans were left with few options. At the same time, Amr and his forces continued to tighten the noose around the city. His forces were not only skilled in warfare, but also adept at understanding the local political dynamics. They knew that the Egyptians, though under Roman rule, were not entirely loyal to their Roman overlords. There was an undercurrent of resentment toward the foreign rulers, and many Egyptians saw the Muslims as a potential ally against their Roman masters. Amr seized upon this sentiment. He began to send envoys into the surrounding Egyptian villages, speaking to the locals and assuring them that the Muslims were not enemies of Egypt. He promised them safety and freedom under Muslim rule, in contrast to the Roman oppression they had long endured. This diplomatic approach began to bear fruit as more and more Egyptians came forward, offering information, supplies, and even support for the Muslim cause. This growing alliance with the Egyptians put additional pressure on the Roman forces within Memphis. They were no longer fighting just the Muslims, they were facing the prospect of a rebellion from the local population. The walls of Memphis, which once seemed impenetrable, were beginning to show signs of weakness, both from external military pressure and internal unrest. With the siege continuing and the Roman resistance weakening, Amr's forces prepared for the final push. The Romans, exhausted from their isolation and depleted of supplies, had no choice but to surrender. The fall of Memphis marked a significant turning point in the Muslim conquest of Egypt. It was not just a military victory, but a symbolic one, showing that the might of the Muslim forces could overcome even the greatest cities of Egypt. Amr ibn al-As had achieved his objective, but the campaign was far from over. The conquest of Memphis was only the beginning. With the city secured, the road to Alexandria, the great Mediterranean port city, lay ahead. However, the victory at Memphis had already begun to reshape the political landscape of Egypt. The Muslim presence in the land was now undeniable, and the Romans, though still holding out in other parts of the country, knew they were facing an unstoppable force. As Amr's forces took control of Memphis, they were not only gaining ground, they were forging relationships with the Egyptians. The conquest of Egypt had moved beyond military strategy. It was now a cultural and political shift that would resonate throughout the region for centuries to come. Following the capture of Memphis, Amr ibn al-As and his forces faced their next great challenge, the city of Babylon. It was one of the most strategically significant locations in Egypt, a city whose walls had long stood as symbols of Roman authority. Babylon, located on the east bank of the Nile River, stood as a stronghold that the Romans would not easily relinquish. Its defensive walls were thick, and its position along the river made it a vital link to the rest of Egypt. To gain control of Egypt, Amr knew that Babylon had to be taken. Babylon was not only a military fortress, it also held considerable political importance. As a key city in the Roman-controlled region, it was a centre of Roman administration and logistics. Its capture would deal a heavy blow to the Roman forces, severely weakening their control over Egypt. The battle for Babylon, therefore, would determine whether the Muslims could sustain their momentum and continue their march through Egypt, or whether the Romans would mount a successful counter-offensive. The city's defences were formidable, and its Roman garrison, although stretched thin, was well entrenched. The Roman commander, aware of the fall of Memphis, took immediate steps to fortify Babylon's defences. The defenders knew that if Babylon fell, it would be a catastrophic blow to Roman interests in Egypt. Thus, the Romans were prepared to resist the Muslim advance with all the resources at their disposal. Amr ibn al-As knew that a direct assault on Babylon would be costly and could result in heavy casualties. Instead of launching a frontal assault, he opted for a siege strategy, hoping to wear down the Roman defenders over time. This decision would prove to be both a calculated and risky one, as it would test the patience and endurance of his troops. The siege of Babylon became a prolonged standoff, with both sides digging in, each awaiting the other to make the first significant move. While Amr's forces set up their positions around Babylon, they faced additional challenges. The Muslim army, though victorious in their previous engagements, had been on the march for weeks and was stretched thin. The harsh conditions of the desert, the scarcity of supplies, and the constant threat of Roman retaliation weighed heavily on the morale of the troops. Despite these challenges, Amr's leadership remained steadfast. He knew that the capture of Babylon was essential, not just for securing Egypt, but for sending a message to the Romans and the Egyptians alike that the Muslim forces were a formidable force to be reckoned with. As the siege dragged on, Amr intensified his diplomatic efforts. He sent envoys to the surrounding Egyptian villages, offering them a chance to align with the Muslim forces. Many Egyptians, who had long been oppressed under Roman rule, were beginning to see the Muslims as a potential liberating force. Some even came forward to provide intelligence on the Roman defences within Babylon, while others sent supplies to Amr's army, weakening the Roman position further. Inside Babylon, the Roman defenders were growing increasingly desperate. The siege had taken a toll on their supplies, and morale was beginning to crack. The Romans had expected reinforcements from the nearby Roman strongholds, but those reinforcements had been delayed, in part due to the Muslim control over Memphis and other strategic locations. The Romans found themselves isolated, with no clear path to resupply or escape. As the siege continued, the Romans inside Babylon had no choice but to come to terms with the reality of their situation. Their ability to hold out was quickly diminishing, and they began to recognize that their position was untenable. They attempted to break out and reinforce their position, but the Muslims were always one step ahead. Any attempt to send messengers or supplies was intercepted by Amr's forces, further weakening the Roman grip on the city. In the face of mounting pressure, the Roman commander of Babylon made a final desperate attempt to resist. He launched a counterattack in the hopes of breaking the Muslim siege and gaining time for reinforcements to arrive. However, this counterattack was poorly coordinated and lacked the necessary support. Amr, ever watchful, took advantage of this misstep, decisively repelling the Roman forces and further demoralizing the defenders. It became clear that Babylon's defences could not hold much longer. Seeing the hopelessness of their situation, the Roman defenders finally agreed to surrender. The fall of Babylon was a momentous occasion, one that shattered Roman control over the eastern part of Egypt. The city, which had once served as a bulwark of Roman power, was now in the hands of the Muslims. For Amr ibn al-As, this victory was more than just a military conquest. It was a symbolic triumph that demonstrated the strength and resilience of the Muslim forces. The capture of Babylon allowed Amr to solidify his control over the region. With the city taken, the Muslims were able to establish a firm foothold on the east side of the Nile River, making it easier to control the surrounding areas and secure their supply lines. Babylon's fall also allowed the Muslims to press forward with their campaign, leaving the Romans with no choice but to retreat to more defensible positions further north. In the aftermath of the siege, Amr turned his attention to the next phase of the campaign. The Romans were still entrenched in Alexandria and other key locations, but the capture of Babylon had given the Muslims an undeniable advantage. The conquest of this important city had further eroded the Roman presence in Egypt, signalling the inevitable collapse of their rule. The struggle for Babylon was not just a victory on the battlefield, it was a victory for the Muslims' strategy and determination. Amr ibn al-As had once again proven his capability as a military leader, demonstrating his ability to outmaneuver and outlast his opponents. But the true significance of the battle for Babylon lay in its symbolism. It marked a decisive shift in the balance of power in Egypt, one that would pave the way for the final stages of the Muslim conquest of Egypt. The siege of Babylon had dragged on for what seemed like an eternity. Amr ibn al-As and his forces, though patient and resolute, had faced numerous challenges in their efforts to bring the well-fortified city to its knees. Babylon, with its thick walls and strategic position along the Nile, had been a critical stronghold for the Romans. Its capture was essential for securing the Muslim conquest of Egypt, but the Romans, led by their determined commander, continued to hold their ground. Inside the city, the Roman forces, though stretched thin, had dug in their heels. They had suffered from the effects of the siege, with supplies running low and morale at an all-time low. Yet, they were unwilling to surrender. Their commander, who had once felt confident in the city's defences, now faced an uncertain future. He realised that, despite the city's formidable fortifications, the Muslims had a strategic advantage. The Egyptians, who had long suffered under Roman rule, were watching the situation closely. Many of them, although they had not yet openly declared allegiance to the Muslim forces, felt the pressure of the changing tides. They had seen the Muslims advance from the south, defeating the Roman forces one by one, and now they began to feel the weight of their own hopes and desires for a different future. Amr ibn al-As knew that time was on his side. The longer the siege dragged on, the more the Roman forces within Babylon would be weakened. Supplies dwindled, and the defenders, though resolute, began to experience the slow erosion of their will. It was only a matter of time before their resolve would break, and the city would fall into Muslim hands. The Muslims continued to tighten the noose around Babylon. Amr's strategy had been to starve the city into submission, cutting off its supply lines and making it impossible for reinforcements to reach the Romans trapped inside. As the days passed, the situation inside the city grew increasingly dire. The Roman soldiers had no choice but to endure the hardships of the siege, their once strong position weakening by the hour. In an attempt to break the stalemate, the Roman commander launched several sorties, hoping to disrupt the Muslim forces surrounding the city. These attempts, however, were poorly coordinated and ineffective. The Muslims, led by Amr's strategic brilliance, countered every move with precision. The Romans, unable to gain the upper hand, were forced back each time. Amr ibn al-As, recognizing that the end was near, intensified his efforts to secure a peaceful resolution. Knowing that the Romans were growing desperate, he sent emissaries into the city to offer terms of surrender. He made it clear that the defenders would be spared their lives if they agreed to lay down their arms and open the gates. The Muslims were not seeking bloodshed, but rather the city itself. Babylon was an important prize, and Amr was determined to win it, not through further unnecessary destruction, but through diplomacy and clever strategy. The Roman commander, facing the inevitable, agreed to the terms. Babylon, once a bastion of Roman power, was handed over to the Muslims without further bloodshed. This surrender marked the beginning of the end for Roman authority in Egypt. The fall of Babylon was a crushing blow to the Roman forces, and the city's capture by the Muslims represented a significant milestone in the conquest of Egypt. For Amr ibn al-As, the victory at Babylon was not only a military success, but a testament to his ability to combine both military strategy and diplomacy. By avoiding unnecessary bloodshed and offering the Romans terms that would allow them to leave with their lives, he showed the true strength of the Muslim forces, not just in battle, but in their capacity to offer justice and mercy when it was needed most. Once Babylon was secured, Amr turned his attention to consolidating Muslim control over the city and its surrounding areas. The Roman presence in the region was quickly diminishing, and the Egyptians, seeing the fall of such a key stronghold, began to see the Muslims as a viable force for change. Amr's reputation as a fair and just leader grew, and more Egyptians came forward to offer their support to the Muslims. With the fall of Babylon, Ammar was now poised to take the next step in the conquest of Egypt. The Romans were scattered, and their hold on the region was slipping away. Yet, even with the city of Babylon under his control, Ammar knew that the campaign was far from over. The next challenge lay to the north, where the great city of Alexandria awaited him. But for the moment, Babylon's fall was a triumph. It had been a long and difficult siege, but it had been won through strategy, patience, and the unwavering leadership of Amr ibn al-As. The Muslim forces had proven their strength and determination, and with Babylon in their hands, the road to Alexandria was now wide open. As Amr ibn al-As and his forces began to consolidate control over the conquered regions of Egypt, the situation within the country itself grew increasingly complex. One of the key factors that would shape the course of the conquest was the position of the Copts, the indigenous Christian population of Egypt. The Copts had long been under the rule of the Roman Empire, and their relationship with the occupying force was one of tension and subjugation. The Egyptians had long harboured a sense of discontent toward their Roman rulers, particularly because of the way they had imposed foreign practices and laws upon the local population. The Copts, although a significant religious and cultural group, had found themselves marginalised within their own land. They were heavily taxed, their religious practices were monitored, and they were denied many of the privileges afforded to the Roman elite. For the Copts, life under Roman rule had become increasingly burdensome. In this climate of discontent, the arrival of the Muslims presented a potential alternative. The message of Islam, with its emphasis on justice and equality, resonated with many of the Egyptians who were tired of a Roman oppression. However, the Muslims were also a foreign force, and the Copts, like many others, were unsure of how they would be treated under this new rule. It was clear that, in order for the Muslim forces to succeed in their conquest of Egypt, they would need to navigate the complex relationship between the different factions within the country. The Copts, although initially hesitant, began to view the Muslims as a potential ally, especially given the oppressive conditions under which they had been living under Roman rule. One of the first significant moves made by Amr ibn al-As was to establish communication with the Copts, recognizing their importance not only as the largest religious group in Egypt, but also as a potential source of support for his campaign. Amr understood that the Copts could provide valuable intelligence, support and resources that would be essential for the Muslims' success in Egypt. He knew that their collaboration could make the difference between a protracted campaign and a swift victory. Amr's approach to the Copts was diplomatic. He sought to reassure them that they would be treated fairly under Muslim rule, offering them assurances of religious freedom and protection of their rights. He extended an olive branch, emphasizing that the Muslims did not seek to impose their faith upon the Egyptians, but instead sought to ensure justice and fairness for all, regardless of their religious background. This message resonated with many Copts who had long suffered under Roman oppression and who were now looking for a new, more just leadership. Amr's ability to gain the support of the Copts proved crucial to the success of the Muslim conquest of Egypt. Many Copts began to see the Muslims as liberators rather than conquerors. They welcomed the Muslim forces and provided them with critical assistance. In return, the Muslims ensured that the Copts were allowed to practice their religion freely, a gesture that helped build trust between the two groups. Despite this initial support, the Copts were not fully unified in their stance. There were some factions within the Coptic community who remained loyal to the Romans and viewed the Muslims as a new occupying force. These individuals saw the Muslim conquest as a threat to the status quo and feared that their position would become more precarious under Muslim rule. The political and religious complexities within Egypt were not easily navigated. The Muslims had to be mindful of the Coptic population's varying allegiances and the delicate balance of power between the different factions. However, Amr's careful diplomacy and his recognition of the Copts' desire for justice and freedom allowed him to maintain the support of the majority of the Coptic population, ensuring that the Muslim forces could operate effectively within the region. The Copts' eventual support played a significant role in the Muslim conquest. Their loyalty helped to solidify Muslim control over Egypt, and their knowledge of the land proved invaluable in assisting the Muslim forces as they advanced through the country. The Copts also played a key role in helping to manage the cities and towns that were brought under Muslim control, providing administrative support and ensuring that the transition to Muslim rule was as smooth as possible. In the years that followed, the relationship between the Muslims and the Copts would continue to evolve. While the initial support of the Copts was crucial to the success of the conquest, the future of their relationship with the Muslim rulers would depend on how the Muslims handled issues of religious tolerance, governance, and justice. The Copts, though initially uncertain of what Muslim rule would bring, had ultimately found a measure of freedom and dignity under the new regime. The Muslims, for their part, recognised the importance of maintaining a fair and just rule, ensuring that the Copts would remain secure in their religious practices and cultural traditions. This partnership between the Copts and the Muslims laid the foundation for the future stability of Egypt under Muslim rule. The Copts of Egypt, once subjected to the harsh rule of the Romans, had now found in the Muslims a force that, while foreign, promised a different kind of governance, one based on fairness, justice, and the protection of their rights. This shift in allegiance marked a significant turning point in the history of Egypt, as the balance of power within the region continued to shift in favour of the Muslim forces. With Babylon under their control and the support of the Copts growing, Amr ibn al-As and his forces prepared for the next critical stage of the conquest, the advance toward Alexandria. Alexandria, the great Mediterranean port city, was not only Egypt's most important urban centre, but also a symbolic stronghold of Roman power in the region. Its fortifications and strategic position made it a city that the Romans could not afford to lose. The city was well known throughout the ancient world. Alexandria had been a centre of knowledge, trade, and culture, its library famous for housing one of the largest collections of written works in the world. However, under Roman rule, the city's former glory had waned, and its people, much like those in the rest of Egypt, were growing disillusioned with their foreign rulers. Despite this, Alexandria still held strong Roman garrisons and was considered a key pillar in the defence of Roman Egypt. Amr ibn al-As, having already achieved significant victories in the south, now set his sights on the city. His army, although battle-hardened and experienced, would face a far tougher challenge here. Alexandria's walls were thick, its harbour fortified, and its defenders were not about to give up the city without a fierce fight. The Muslims' progress, while swift, would be tested in a way it had not been before. Before advancing, Amr carefully planned the military strategy. He knew that Alexandria's coastal location presented both an advantage and a challenge. The city could be resupplied by sea, and the Roman forces stationed there were well aware of the strategic importance of this route. The Muslim forces needed to cut off any potential reinforcement and blockade the city's ports to prevent supplies from reaching the defenders. But this would not be easy. Alexandria was a bustling trade hub with heavy traffic coming and going along the Mediterranean. Amr's forces marched steadily toward the city, encountering few obstacles along the way. The Egyptians, who had watched the Muslim forces steadily gain ground, continued to provide support and intelligence, giving Amr's army crucial insight into the Roman defences. The Copts, now more supportive of the Muslims, offered their assistance by guiding Amr's forces and aiding in communication with the local population. As the Muslim army neared Alexandria, they were met with both anticipation and fear. The Romans, who had already received word of the advancing forces, prepared their defences, reinforcing the city's walls and organising their military ranks. The city was a powerful symbol of Roman authority in Egypt, and its defenders were determined to resist the Muslims at all costs. The Muslim approach to Alexandria was methodical. Amr knew that a prolonged siege like the one at Babylon could have disastrous effects on both sides. Instead of launching an immediate full-scale assault, he first attempted to negotiate with the defenders, hoping to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. His offer was clear. If the Romans surrendered, they would be spared their lives, and the city would be taken with minimal destruction. However, the Romans, unwilling to give up such a key strategic asset, rejected Amr's offer and braced themselves for a prolonged conflict. The siege of Alexandria was set in motion, with Amr's forces surrounding the city and cutting off its supply lines. The Romans, for their part, held firm, but they soon realised that their position was untenable. The blockade that Amr imposed on the city's harbour made it impossible for the Romans to receive reinforcements or resupply their forces. With every passing day, their situation grew more desperate. Inside the city, the defenders were faced with the grim reality of being cut off from the outside world. Supplies dwindled, and morale began to falter. The Romans could no longer maintain their control over Alexandria without external support, and their leaders began to consider their options. Amr, understanding the importance of this moment, decided to intensify the pressure on the city. his forces continued to encircle Alexandria, further isolating the defenders. The Egyptians, many of whom were sympathetic to the Muslim cause, continued to help the Muslims with information and supplies, making it harder for the Romans to mount any successful resistance. Amr's strategy worked. The Romans, unable to continue fighting with dwindling resources and no hope of reinforcements, eventually realized that they could not hold Alexandria indefinitely. The city's defenders, exhausted and demoralized, were forced to consider surrender. They had no choice but to acknowledge the inevitable. In a final attempt to salvage something from the situation, the Romans negotiated a surrender with Amr. The terms were similar to those offered earlier. The defenders would be allowed to leave the city safely, and the Muslims would take control of Alexandria without unnecessary violence. The Romans, seeing no other viable option, agreed to the terms, and Alexandria fell into Muslim hands. The conquest of Alexandria was a monumental victory for Amr ibn al-As and the Muslim forces. It marked the final nail in the coffin of Roman rule in Egypt and cemented the Muslims' control over the region. Alexandria, once the pride of the Roman Empire, was now under Muslim authority, and its strategic importance could no longer be used against the Muslims. With the city secured, Amr turned his attention to solidifying Muslim control over the entire region. Alexandria's fall represented not just a military triumph, but a symbolic one. It demonstrated the Muslims' ability to overcome formidable defences and win even in the face of tough resistance. The road to a unified Egypt was now open, and with Alexandria under his control, Amr ibn al-As knew that the rest of the conquest would soon follow. For the Egyptians, the fall of Alexandria was a turning point. The city, which had once been a stronghold of foreign control, was now a part of the expanding Muslim empire. The Roman grip on Egypt had been shattered, and the future of the land lay in the hands of the Muslims, who promised to bring justice, freedom, and a new way of governance to the region. With Alexandria's fall, the Muslims had secured not just a strategic victory, but a cultural and political shift that would resonate throughout Egypt for years to come. With the fall of Alexandria's outer defences and the strategic isolation of the city, Amr ibn al-As's forces stood on the brink of what would become one of the most significant victories in the Muslim conquest of Egypt. The city, though not yet fully under Muslim control, was now cut off from the outside world. The siege had forced the Romans inside Alexandria to face an inescapable reality. Their time was running out. The Romans, holed up in the city, had attempted to bolster their defences as best they could. Alexandria's fortifications, renowned for their strength, had withstood many challenges over the centuries, but the siege by the Muslim forces had proved to be a different kind of challenge. With no fresh supplies reaching the city and the harbour blocked, the defenders were left to endure the strain of isolation and dwindling resources. As the siege continued, Amr's patience and methodical approach paid off. He understood that Alexandria's defenders, despite their resistance, were running out of options. For all their might, they could not keep up with the ever-tightening grip of the Muslim forces surrounding them. The siege itself, now prolonged, had already had significant consequences. It had sapped the defenders' morale, and their ability to continue fighting was quickly diminishing. However, Amr, recognizing the importance of minimizing destruction, once again reached out with offers of peaceful surrender. Amr ibn al-As, having already proven his ability to both lead and negotiate, sent emissaries into the city with a message. The defenders would be spared if they agreed to surrender. The Muslims, unlike the Romans, sought to avoid needless destruction. The city could be spared if the defenders opened the gates and allowed the Muslims to take control peacefully. The promise of safety and preservation of life weighed heavily on the Romans, who, after long deliberations and facing inevitable defeat, accepted the offer. This surrender of Alexandria, though strategically crucial, was also a key moment of symbolic victory for the Muslims. The city had long been a symbol of Roman power and influence in the region, and its loss marked a definitive end to Roman rule in Egypt. But more importantly, Alexandria's fall demonstrated the effectiveness of Amr's strategy, a combination of military pressure, diplomatic negotiation, and psychological warfare. By offering peace instead of further destruction, Amr ensured that his conquest would not be marked by unnecessary bloodshed, fostering goodwill among the local population. The terms of the surrender allowed the Roman garrison to leave the city with their lives, but it also granted Amr the control he had been seeking. Alexandria, now in Muslim hands, represented a crucial victory, both for its strategic significance and its symbolic value. Alexandria's rich history, its wealth, and its position as a trade hub would now serve as a key part of the expanding Muslim empire. Once inside the city, Amr's forces set to work securing it and its surrounding areas. The strategic importance of Alexandria was immediately apparent. As the gateway between Egypt and the Mediterranean, the city was not just an urban centre, it was a vital link for trade, communications and military movements. The Muslims, now in control of the city, could move freely across Egypt and establish firm rule over the rest of the land. Alexandria was no longer an obstacle. It had become a crucial asset to the Muslim forces. In the aftermath of the conquest, Amr ibn al-As demonstrated a keen sense of leadership by turning Alexandria into a symbol of the new order. The city's historical significance was acknowledged, but it was now integrated into the Muslim world, its people no longer subjects of the Roman Empire, but rather part of the expanding Islamic state. The Coptic population, who had already shown signs of support for the Muslims, found that their status was secure under the new rulers. Their religious and cultural rights were respected, and many Egyptians saw in the Muslim rule a promise of justice and a departure from the harsh Roman policies they had endured for so long. The conquest of Alexandria, though achieved through a combination of military strategy and diplomacy, was not the end of the campaign in Egypt. But it was undoubtedly the most significant victory thus far. With Alexandria secured, the Muslims now controlled the major urban centre in the region and had a clear path to further expansion. The road to Cairo, the capital of Egypt, and beyond was now open. For Amr ibn al-As, this victory solidified his reputation as a leader who could blend both military prowess and diplomatic acumen. His ability to take Alexandria without resorting to wanton destruction was seen not only as a strategic triumph, but also as a reflection of the Muslim ethos, which sought to balance justice with mercy. The city, once a hub of Roman power, was now a symbol of the new era that the Muslims were bringing to Egypt. The conquest of Alexandria marked the end of Roman dominance in Egypt and signalled the beginning of a new phase in the region's history. As Amr ibn al-As moved forward with his campaign, the fall of Alexandria sent a clear message to the remaining Roman forces and to the Egyptians themselves. The Muslims were here to stay, and their rule would reshape the landscape of Egypt for generations to come. With the fall of Alexandria, Amr ibn al-As and the Muslim forces now stood at the threshold of a new era in Egypt. The city's strategic capture had not only provided the Muslims with the Mediterranean gateway, but it also symbolized the end of a Roman influence in the region. Yet, while Alexandria held immense political and economic significance, Amr understood that the heart of Egypt lay further south, in the city of Fustat, which was to become the new capital of Muslim Egypt. Fustat was not as historically renowned as Alexandria, but it was strategically positioned. Located near the Nile and close to the remnants of ancient Memphis, it provided a perfect base for Amr and his forces to establish control over the entire country. The city's location allowed for easy access to the rest of Egypt, while also providing a central hub for governance and military operations. Amr's decision to establish Fustat as the capital was also symbolic. It marked a new chapter for Egypt under Muslim rule, one that was not bound by the traditions and legacy of the Roman Empire. In establishing Fustat as the capital, Amr sought to create a fresh start for Egypt, one free from the weight of Roman imperialism. The move signalled to both the Egyptians and the broader world that a new order was now in place, an order that would bring stability, security, and above all justice to the land. With Alexandria now secured, Amr turned his attention to the development of Fustat. The city was still in its early stages, not yet a grand metropolis, but Amr was determined to lay the foundations for a prosperous and stable centre of governance. His forces set about building the necessary infrastructure, establishing military bases, and ensuring that the city was ready to serve as the administrative heart of the new Muslim-controlled Egypt. One of the first steps Amr took was to ensure that the city's population was diverse, welcoming not just the Muslim forces, but also the indigenous Egyptians, including the Copts, who had now aligned themselves with the Muslim rule. Amr, following the pattern of his earlier actions, sought to foster unity by offering a system of governance that was fair and inclusive. The Copts, who had suffered under Roman rule, found that they were treated with respect and given a certain degree of autonomy within the new Muslim-controlled Egypt. As Fustat began to take shape, its role as the capital became increasingly clear. Amr's focus was not only on the physical infrastructure, but also on the governance system that would ensure stability throughout Egypt. He made it a point to consult with local leaders, both Muslim and non-Muslim, to create a system that respected Egypt's diverse population, while also establishing Muslim rule as the guiding principle. The move to Fustat also reflected the broader Islamic vision of governance, one that sought to incorporate local traditions and cultures within the framework of Islamic principles. The city became a melting pot of people from various backgrounds, each contributing to the development of the new society. The Coptic population in particular found themselves in a unique position, as they were now able to practice their religion freely, a privilege they had not known under Roman rule. As Amr worked to establish the new capital, he also recognized the importance of economic stability. The region around Fustat was fertile and well suited for agriculture, and its position along the Nile made it an ideal location for trade. The establishment of Fustat as a major administrative and economic hub allowed Amr and the Muslim forces to capitalize on Egypt's natural resources, ensuring that the conquest would not only be political, but also economically sustainable. With the consolidation of power in Fustat, Amr's vision for Egypt began to take shape. The city, once a small settlement, now began to grow into a bustling center of administration, culture, and commerce. The streets of Fustat became home to traders, scholars, and workers of all kinds, each contributing to the city's growing importance. For the Egyptians, the creation of Fustat as the new capital was a turning point. The city was not only a symbol of the new political order, but it was also a place of opportunity for those who had long been oppressed under Roman rule. The Muslim approach to governance, which emphasized justice and fairness, offered a new hope for many Egyptians who had grown weary of the harsh Roman policies. With Fustat as the new center of power, they were able to look forward to a more inclusive and stable future under Muslim rule. Amr ibn al-As's decision to establish Fustat as the capital was, in many ways, the final step in consolidating Muslim control over Egypt. It marked the transformation of Egypt from a province of the Roman Empire to a thriving part of the Muslim world. The development of Fustat into a bustling capital was a testament to the foresight and leadership of Amr, whose vision for Egypt extended far beyond military conquest. Under his guidance, Egypt would begin to flourish, not only as a political entity but also as a cultural and economic powerhouse in the heart of the Muslim Empire. As Amr ibn al-As secured control over Egypt and began to solidify his rule, his efforts turned to ensuring that the newly conquered land was integrated into the broader Islamic state. The fall of Alexandria, the establishment of Fustat as the capital, and the overall success of the Muslim conquest of Egypt had far-reaching implications, but they were only part of the larger picture. The next crucial phase of Amr's mission involved establishing a strong connection with the central leadership of the Muslim Caliphate. At the heart of this process was the relationship between Amr and the Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab, the second Caliph of Islam. Although Amr had already achieved significant military victories, his actions were always guided by the authority of the Caliph. Umar, a decisive and visionary leader, had given Amr the task of conquering Egypt. But as Egypt was now under Muslim control, the communication between Amr and Umar would take on even greater importance. The direction in which the Muslim rule in Egypt would evolve depended heavily on their relationship and the strategic decisions that would follow. In the wake of the conquest, Amr sent a message to Umar, informing him of the successful takeover of Egypt. He reported that the land was now under Muslim control, and he updated the Caliph on the situation in Alexandria and Fustat. Amr, ever prudent, knew that he had to report back to the Caliph on matters of governance, military strategy, and the overall condition of Egypt. While the conquest was complete, there were still challenges ahead in terms of administration and ensuring the long-term stability of the region. Umar, in turn, responded with clear instructions that would further shape Egypt's future. While his general Amr had displayed remarkable leadership on the battlefield, Umar's role was one of overseeing the broader political and religious considerations of the newly conquered land. The relationship between the Caliph and the Nile was more than just a symbolic one. It was a partnership that would shape the trajectory of Egypt under Muslim rule. Umar's primary concern was the governance of Egypt in accordance with Islamic principles. He was known for his strong stance on justice and fairness, and he sought to ensure that the people of Egypt would be treated with dignity, regardless of their religion or background. Umar's letter to Amr reflected his desire to maintain peace and stability, as well as his concern for the well-being of the local population. One of the most significant decisions that came from this correspondence was Umar's order for Amr to ensure that the conquered Egyptians were treated justly. This order was particularly relevant in light of the large Christian Coptic population in Egypt. Umar made it clear that the Copts should not be oppressed under Muslim rule and that their rights to practice their faith and live in peace should be respected. This was a critical moment in the history of Egypt, as it marked the beginning of a new relationship between the Muslims and the Copts, one based on mutual respect and religious tolerance. Umar's instructions also included directives regarding the administration of Egypt. As a new province of the Islamic Caliphate, Egypt would require careful management to ensure that it would flourish both economically and politically. Umar emphasized the importance of maintaining good governance, ensuring that the people of Egypt were taxed fairly and that resources were used efficiently. He reminded Amr that the primary objective was not merely military conquest, but the creation of a just society in which both Muslims and non-Muslims could live harmoniously. Amr ibn al-As, understanding the importance of these instructions, set to work in applying Umar's directives. He focused on creating an efficient administrative system that would oversee Egypt's transition to Muslim rule. He also worked to integrate the local Egyptian leadership into this system, recognizing the value of utilizing the existing infrastructure and expertise of the region. One of the challenges Amr faced was ensuring that the Nile, the lifeblood of Egypt, was properly managed. The Nile had always been the central source of Egypt's agriculture, and it was vital to maintain a stable water supply for the country's prosperity. Under the Romans, the Nile had been used as a tool of control, and Amr understood that securing it would be critical to maintaining stability in the region. The Muslim administration under Amr focused on maintaining the flow of water through the irrigation systems and ensuring that Egypt's agricultural output was maximized. With much of the population relying on agriculture for their livelihood, Amr's leadership in overseeing the management of the Nile's resources was essential. His efforts in ensuring that the population had access to water and that the agricultural systems remained intact helped solidify Muslim rule in Egypt and ensured that the region remained prosperous. Umar's relationship with the Nile was symbolic as well. By directing Amr to oversee the proper management of Egypt's resources, he demonstrated the importance of justice and care in governance. It was not enough to simply conquer a land. It had to be nurtured, protected, and allowed to thrive. The management of the Nile was an expression of this broader vision, that Egypt, like the other lands under Muslim rule, should prosper under Islamic governance, not just through military might, but through effective and just leadership. With the Caliph's guidance, Amr ibn al-As worked to cement the rule of the Islamic State in Egypt. His ability to manage both the military aspects of the conquest and the administrative challenges that followed was critical in ensuring Egypt's long-term stability under Muslim rule. As the relationship between Amr and the Caliph strengthened, it became clear that Egypt was not just a conquered land, it was a part of the greater Islamic world, one that would play a key role in the expansion and development of the Caliphate. As Amr continued to administer Egypt, the once Roman-controlled land began to flourish under its new rulers. The economic systems were restructured, justice was served, and the local populations, both Muslim and non-Muslim, began to see the benefits of a more inclusive and fair system. Egypt's relationship with the Nile, its vital water source, its agricultural heart, was handled with great care, ensuring the country would thrive under Muslim governance for generations to come. With Egypt firmly under Muslim control and Fustat established as the new capital, Amr ibn al-As turned his attention to the larger goal of expanding the Muslim presence across North Africa. While Egypt had been a critical part of the Islamic conquests, the surrounding regions of North Africa held significant strategic and economic importance. The conquest of Barca and Tripoli was the next step in consolidating Muslim rule in the region and securing access to the Mediterranean. The regions of Barca, modern-day Libya, and Tripoli, located to the west of Egypt, had long been under Roman and Byzantine influence. Their strategic location along the coast of North Africa made them vital for the control of Mediterranean trade routes and for securing the land passage between Egypt and the rest of North Africa. Both areas had been fiercely contested by the Romans and Byzantines, but under Muslim rule they would become integral parts of the growing Islamic Empire. Amr ibn al-As, having established stability in Egypt, was now ready to push westward. His strategy was clear: to continue the momentum of the Muslim conquests and to secure North Africa as part of the larger Islamic world. The key challenge in the conquest of Barca and Tripoli was not just military, but also logistical. The terrain was harsh, and the regions were sparsely populated. Yet, the Muslim forces had learned from their previous campaigns, and they understood that patience and precision were necessary. Amr's forces began their advance into Barca, where they encountered significant resistance. The local population, though under Roman rule for centuries, was not entirely loyal to the Byzantines, and many were disillusioned with their foreign rulers. However, the Roman and Byzantine forces in the region, while not large in number, were still formidable and entrenched in fortified positions. The cities of Barca, like many in North Africa, were well defended, and the Muslims would have to employ a mix of siege warfare and swift military tactics to break through. The campaign in Barca began with a series of skirmishes and smaller battles as Amr's forces advanced. They faced opposition from local defenders, but the Muslims gradually gained the upper hand due to their superior tactics and military coordination. As the Muslims pushed forward, many of the local inhabitants, especially the Berbers and the indigenous people of North Africa, began to see the Muslims as a potential liberating force. Some even chose to ally with the Muslim forces, offering valuable intelligence, supplies and reinforcements. After several weeks of fighting and manoeuvring, Amr's forces successfully captured several key fortresses in Barca, securing a foothold in the region. With Barca under control, Amr's next target was Tripoli, further to the west. The city of Tripoli was even more important than Barca, both militarily and economically, as it was a major coastal city with a bustling port that played a central role in trade across the Mediterranean. Tripoli's defences were formidable, and the city had a long history of resisting foreign invaders. The Romans had fortified the city heavily, and it was protected by a well-organised garrison. Yet Amr's forces were not deterred. He knew that the key to taking Tripoli was to maintain the pressure on the city, while continuing to cut off its supply lines and reinforcements. The Muslim forces, having gained experience in sieging fortified cities during their conquest of Egypt, now applied their knowledge to Tripoli's defences. The siege of Tripoli was intense and lasted for several weeks. The Muslim forces surrounded the city, cutting off trade routes and preventing reinforcements from reaching the defenders. At the same time, Amr used his diplomatic skills, seeking to win over the local population. He promised them safety and security if they chose to join the Muslims, emphasizing the fairness and justice of the new rule. Over time, the pressure mounted on Tripoli's defenders, and many within the city began to lose hope. Eventually, the Romans in Tripoli were faced with an ultimatum: surrender or face destruction. The local defenders, seeing no way to continue the fight, agreed to surrender the city. Tripoli, once a Roman stronghold, now fell into the hands of the Muslims. The conquest of Tripoli was a major victory, and it marked the completion of the Muslim conquest of the key regions of Barca and Tripoli. Following the successful conquest of these regions, Amr ibn al-As established Muslim control over the western part of North Africa, securing the coastline along the Mediterranean. The cities of Barca and Tripoli, now part of the Islamic State, served as vital links between Egypt and the larger North African territories. The Muslim forces had not only gained control of key trade routes, but had also secured access to the Mediterranean, opening the door for further expansion into the western parts of North Africa. Amr's success in Barca and Tripoli demonstrated the strength and resilience of the Muslim forces. The campaigns in these regions were marked by tactical brilliance, strategic patience, and diplomatic outreach to the local populations. Amr's ability to secure the loyalty of the local Berbers and North Africans, who had long resisted Roman and Byzantine rule, was instrumental in the success of the campaigns. The conquest of Barca and Tripoli also had far-reaching consequences for the future of the Muslim world. By securing these regions, the Muslims established a foothold in North Africa that would eventually allow them to continue their expansion into the Maghreb and beyond. The region, now under Muslim control, would become an important part of the larger Islamic empire, contributing to its economic, cultural and military strength for centuries to come. For Amr ibn al-As, the successful conquest of Barca and Tripoli was a crowning achievement, solidifying his reputation as one of the most capable and strategic commanders of the Muslim Empire. With these victories, the Muslim presence in North Africa was no longer just a possibility. It was a reality, and the groundwork had been laid for further conquests in the western part of the continent. The victory in Barca and Tripoli, like the conquest of Egypt, marked the expansion of the Islamic Empire, bringing new territories into the fold and laying the foundation for the great Islamic civilization that would flourish in the centuries to come. As Amr ibn al-As had successfully consolidated control over Egypt and advanced further into North Africa, his relationship with the caliphs who led the growing Muslim empire became even more significant. The governance of Egypt, once a province of the Roman Empire, was now under Amr's stewardship, but he was always mindful that his actions and decisions were aligned with the guidance of the caliph in Medina. The relationship between the caliph and Amr would prove to be an essential element in the continuing success of the Muslim conquests. When Amr first received the call to lead the conquest of Egypt, the task was not an easy one. It was a huge responsibility, one that came with both immense challenges and great rewards. Yet the caliph, Umar ibn al-Khattab, had complete trust in Amr's military and leadership abilities. He was not only a strong and capable general, but also a man of principle, someone who could make tough decisions and manage the complexities of governance. Umar, as the second caliph of Islam, had a strict sense of justice and fairness, guiding his leadership through the principle that the welfare of the people, both Muslim and non-Muslim, was paramount. His approach to leadership was grounded in the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad and the example of early Islamic principles. Amr, in his role as governor, had to ensure that the policies of the caliph were followed and that his military successes were matched with sound governance. Despite Amr's successes on the battlefield and in the conquest of Egypt, his relationship with the caliph was not without tension. Umar's leadership was characterized by a strict and rigorous sense of accountability. As much as he trusted Amr, Umar remained vigilant, ensuring that the governor's actions aligned with the overarching goals of the caliphate. This was particularly evident when Amr sent his reports back to Umar, updating him on the situation in Egypt and the progress of the Muslim forces. Umar was known for his directness and his willingness to hold his governors accountable. When he received reports from Amr, he would often ask for additional details or question decisions that he felt needed clarification. It was in these moments that Amr's leadership skills were truly tested. The communication between the caliph and the governor was not just a simple exchange of information. It was a dialogue that shaped the future of the conquest and governance of Egypt. One such instance was when Amr faced a difficult situation regarding the administration of Egypt. There were tensions between the local Coptic population and the Muslim leadership, and Amr needed to navigate these delicate relations while maintaining order and peace. In these times, the guidance from Umar was crucial. The caliph emphasized the importance of justice, ensuring that the Copts were not oppressed and that their religious freedoms were respected. Amr, understanding the political and religious implications, adhered to these principles, which helped to establish a lasting peace between the Muslims and the Coptic population. Though Amr was a capable leader in his own right, he knew that his authority stemmed from the trust placed in him by the caliph. Umar's strictness ensured that Amr's decisions were constantly scrutinized, but it also ensured that the caliphate's principles of justice and fairness were maintained throughout Egypt. Amr had to be vigilant in his dealings, ensuring that he adhered to the caliph's instructions and did not overstep his bounds. Amr's relationship with Umar was one of both respect and challenge. While the caliph trusted him to handle the affairs of Egypt, he did not give him free rein without oversight. Umar's leadership style was firm but fair, and this helped to shape Amr's own leadership approach. The constant communication between the two men created a structure of governance where Amr was both empowered and held accountable by the caliphate's standards. One notable episode of this interaction came when Amr sought to expand Muslim control further into North Africa. The caliph was initially hesitant, given the challenges of managing Egypt and the surrounding regions. However, Amr's strategic vision and his ability to manage the local populations convinced Umar to grant him permission for the expansion. The mutual trust between the two men played a critical role in the success of the ongoing conquests. Yet, even as Amr advanced further into Africa and strengthened his hold over Egypt, the caliph's oversight remained a key factor in his governance. When Amr returned to Medina after the successful campaigns in Egypt, he faced a warm reception from the caliph, who acknowledged his successes but also reminded him of the need for continued vigilance and dedication to the Islamic principles of justice. After the initial conquest of Alexandria, the city had remained under Muslim control. However, the Romans, under the command of a new military leader, did not forget the strategic importance of the city and sought to retake it. The Romans, once masters of Alexandria, now found themselves having to reclaim what they had lost, a task that would prove challenging given the Muslim stronghold. The Romans in Alexandria, bolstered by new reinforcements, made a decisive move to challenge the Muslim forces. Their strategy was to build on the military advantages they had lost and attempt to regain their former position in the region. Amr ibn al-As, aware of the potential for Roman retaliation, made preparations to defend the city once more. Amr's forces were well entrenched within the city, but the Romans had several advantages on their side, including reinforcements and the experience of past battles. Amr knew that Alexandria's strategic significance made it a target for Roman forces. He understood that to keep Egypt secure and to prevent the Roman threat from growing, it was essential to hold Alexandria at all costs. His decision to defend Alexandria once more would be a defining moment in his leadership. The Roman forces approached Alexandria with a large military contingent, including a powerful naval force to cut off any possibility of Muslim reinforcements or escape. However, Amr's forces were prepared. They had learned valuable lessons during their first siege of the city, and now they were determined to defend Alexandria with even more vigour and resolve. The battle that unfolded in Alexandria was a testament to the skill and determination of both sides. The Muslims, having had the upper hand in the previous campaign, now had to prove once again that they could hold on to the city against a resurgent Roman force. The confrontation was intense, and the Roman forces quickly realised that their task would not be easy. The Muslim defence was well organised, and Amr's leadership on the battlefield proved to be decisive. The Roman commander, seeking to break the Muslim defence, deployed his forces in a series of attacks aimed at different parts of the city. However, Amr, through careful strategy, was able to coordinate his defences effectively. His forces held their ground, repelling the Roman assaults and preventing the Romans from gaining any significant foothold. For several days the Romans attempted to breach Alexandria's walls and fortifications, but their efforts were met with failure. Amr's leadership and the discipline of his soldiers kept the Romans at bay. The battle was a test of endurance, and the Muslims proved their resolve to maintain control of the city. As the days wore on, the Romans grew frustrated. The reinforcements they had hoped for did not materialize in time, and the siege began to take its toll on their forces. Amr's strategy of holding firm, wearing down the Roman forces with carefully timed counterattacks, was slowly paying off. His forces, though outnumbered, remained steadfast, refusing to give up the key city. In the end, the Romans, unable to break through the Muslim defences, were forced to retreat. Their second attempt to retake Alexandria had failed, and the city remained under Muslim control. The battle was not only a military victory for Amr ibn al-As, but also a demonstration of the strength and resilience of the Muslim forces. Alexandria, once a symbol of Roman power, had now become a symbol of the unshakable Muslim presence in Egypt. This second conquest of Alexandria confirmed that the Muslim hold on the city was now secure. The Romans, despite their best efforts, had been unable to regain what they had lost. With Alexandria firmly in Muslim hands, Amr turned his attention to further consolidating his rule over Egypt and extending the Muslim Empire's reach into North Africa. The successful defence of Alexandria also had broader implications for the region. It sent a clear message to the remaining Roman forces in North Africa. The Muslims were not only capable of defending their conquests, but also determined to expand their influence throughout the Mediterranean world. The defeat of the Romans in Alexandria effectively sealed the fate of Roman power in Egypt and North Africa, and it marked another significant step in the growth of the Islamic Empire. Amr's success in defending Alexandria solidified his reputation as one of the great military leaders of his time. His ability to manage both the military and political challenges of governing Egypt and North Africa was a testament to his skill and vision. Under his leadership, Egypt and its surrounding regions continued to flourish, and Alexandria remained a key centre of Muslim power in the Mediterranean. With the second conquest of Alexandria now behind him, Amr looked ahead to the future. The Muslim forces had proven themselves in battle once more, and Egypt was secure under Muslim rule. The defeat of the Roman forces in Alexandria allowed Amr and the Muslims to strengthen their position, setting the stage for further campaigns and expansion in the years to come. With Egypt firmly under Muslim control and the Roman threat significantly diminished, Amr ibn al-As turned his focus toward the broader objective of North Africa. The conquest of Egypt was a critical step, but Amr knew that securing North Africa was necessary to protect the southern borders of the Muslim Empire and to ensure that the region became an integral part of the rapidly expanding Islamic Caliphate. The path to this greater conquest would take the Muslims deep into the heart of North Africa, where resistance remained fierce but not insurmountable. Amr's goal was clear: to expand the reach of the Muslim Empire westward, establishing control over key territories that had long been under Roman or Byzantine influence. The territories of North Africa, including present-day Libya, Tunisia, Algeria and Morocco, held significant strategic, economic and cultural importance. Control over these regions would not only protect the Muslim heartlands, but also provide access to valuable resources, trade routes and the Mediterranean coast. The region of North Africa was vast and diverse, populated by various Berber tribes who had resisted Roman and Byzantine control for centuries. Although some of these tribes had settled in cities under Roman influence, many still maintained a degree of independence in the mountainous and desert regions. Amr understood that this diversity of peoples and cultures would require careful diplomacy, alongside military action, to integrate North Africa into the Muslim Empire. As Amr prepared for the next phase of his campaign, the Muslim forces gathered at the frontier of Egypt and the territories of North Africa. The initial focus was on the coastal regions, which were essential for securing maritime routes and ensuring that the Mediterranean was under Muslim control. With Alexandria now secure, the coastal cities in Tunisia and Libya were the next logical targets. Amr's strategy involved both direct military engagements and alliances with local populations. He had learned from previous campaigns that securing local support, particularly from the Berber tribes, would be crucial for the long-term success of the conquest. While some of the tribes in the region were hostile to foreign rule, many others were weary of Byzantine oppression and saw the Muslims as potential allies. The message Amr sent was clear. The Muslims came not as conquerors, but as liberators, offering justice and stability in exchange for loyalty. The first major target in the region was the city of Sufetula, a fortified Roman stronghold that stood as a key obstacle in the path of Muslim expansion. The city was well defended, with Roman troops stationed in the area and a population that had been loyal to the empire for generations. However, Amr's forces were experienced, having taken key cities like Alexandria and Memphis, and they approached Sufetula with the same strategy of surrounding the city and cutting off supply lines. The Muslim forces focused on isolating the city, preventing reinforcements from reaching the defenders. Sufetula's Roman garrison put up a strong fight, but they were unable to withstand the siege for long. The Muslims employed a combination of direct military pressure and psychological tactics, aiming to wear down the defenders. Over time, the siege took its toll on the Roman forces. Food and supplies dwindled, and the defenders' morale began to falter. It became increasingly clear that the city could not hold out much longer. As the siege dragged on, Amr's forces continued to tighten their grip around Sufetula. Eventually, the Roman defenders were forced to surrender, and the city fell into Muslim hands. The conquest of Sufetula was a significant victory, not only because of its military importance, but also because it marked the beginning of the Muslims' successful expansion into North Africa. It sent a clear message to the remaining Roman and Byzantine forces in the region. The Muslim Empire was now a formidable power that could not be easily ignored. Following the capture of Sufetula, Amr's forces continued their march westward, advancing deeper into the heart of North Africa. The conquest of the region was not without its challenges. Although the Romans had been defeated in several key cities, resistance from local Berber tribes remained a significant obstacle. Many of these tribes had long resisted foreign domination and were determined to maintain their independence. However, Amr's ability to balance military force with diplomatic efforts allowed him to forge alliances with some tribes, while neutralizing others through force when necessary. One of the key aspects of Amr's strategy was his understanding of the importance of local support. While military strength was essential for securing key cities, the long-term stability of Muslim rule in North Africa would depend on the cooperation of the indigenous populations. Amr's interactions with the Berbers and other local tribes were marked by a commitment to justice, fairness, and respect for local traditions. This approach helped to build trust between the Muslim forces and the local populations, paving the way for a smoother integration of North Africa into the Muslim Caliphate. As Amr's forces advanced further west, they encountered increasingly complex political and military challenges. Yet the success in Sufetula had created momentum, and the Muslims continued to press forward. With each city captured, Amr's vision of a unified North Africa under Muslim rule became more tangible. The conquest of North Africa would not be achieved overnight, but the success in Sufetula and the continued expansion of the Muslim forces laid a solid foundation for future victories. By the end of this chapter in the conquest of North Africa, Amr ibn al-As had proven his ability not only as a military commander, but also as a leader capable of integrating diverse peoples into the Islamic Empire. The conquest of the coastal regions and the successful campaign in Sufetula marked a crucial step in securing the Muslim presence in North Africa. However, Amr knew that the journey was far from over. The challenges ahead would require both military might and diplomatic finesse as the Muslims continued their march across the continent. The objective was clear: to secure North Africa as a key part of the Islamic world and ensure the stability and prosperity of the newly established empire. After the successful conquest of key cities and strategic positions in North Africa, Amr ibn al-As now faced one of the most significant military challenges of his career, the Battle of Sufetula. The city, a key Roman stronghold in the region, was an essential target in the Muslim campaign to expand their influence across North Africa. The battle for Sufetula would be a defining moment in the ongoing conflict between the Muslims and the Roman forces, as well as a critical step in securing control over the western parts of the African continent. Sufetula, located in what is now Tunisia, was a fortified city with a well-trained Roman garrison. It stood as a major obstacle to Muslim ambitions in the region, and the Roman forces were determined to protect it at all costs. The city was heavily fortified, with walls and defensive positions that had withstood previous attempts at conquest. The Romans, though weakened by prior defeats, still had a significant presence in the region, and they hoped to halt the Muslim advance at Sufetula. Amr ibn al-As knew that capturing Sufetula would be no easy task. The city's strategic location and fortifications made it a difficult target, and the Romans were determined to defend it. However, the Muslim forces had already shown their ability to overcome such challenges. Amr, having secured Egypt and other key regions, was confident in his troops' capabilities and the strength of his strategy. His plan was to besiege the city, cutting off its supply lines and isolating it from outside help, while using the same military discipline and tactics that had proven successful in previous campaigns. The siege of Sufetula began with a calculated approach. Amr's forces surrounded the city, preventing any supplies or reinforcements from reaching the Roman defenders. The city's fortifications were formidable, but Amr's forces were experienced in siege warfare. Over the course of the siege, the Romans inside Sufetula faced mounting pressure as food and resources dwindled. They were isolated, with no way of receiving reinforcements, and the morale of the defenders began to falter. The Romans, though well equipped and trained, could not maintain their defence against the growing pressure from Amr's forces. The siege tactics employed by the Muslims were effective in cutting off their opponent's ability to sustain the city. While the Romans tried to launch counterattacks to break the siege, Amr's forces were able to repel them, further weakening the Roman position. As the siege continued, Amr sent messengers to the Roman defenders, offering them a chance to surrender in exchange for their safety. He knew that the longer the siege went on, the more likely it was that the defenders would eventually accept his terms. However, the Roman commander in Sufetula, though under pressure, was determined to resist. The battle dragged on, but the Romans were unable to break through the Muslim encirclement. Amr's forces kept up the pressure, utilising their superior military organisation and strategic positioning to keep the Romans from making any headway. The Muslims had the advantage in terms of numbers, experience and morale, and their coordinated attacks gradually wore down the defenders. The prolonged siege, combined with the constant threat of Muslim assault, made it clear to the Roman forces that their position in Sufetula was untenable. After several weeks of siege, the Roman commander was forced to acknowledge the inevitable. The city's defences had been worn down, and his forces were no longer able to fight effectively. With supplies exhausted and no reinforcements forthcoming, the Roman commander had no choice but to surrender. In exchange for their lives, the defenders agreed to open the gates of Sufetula to the Muslim forces. The fall of Sufetula was a pivotal moment in the Muslim conquest of North Africa. The capture of this important Roman stronghold allowed Amr ibn al-As to further consolidate Muslim control over the region. With the city in Muslim hands, Amr's forces were able to expand their influence into neighbouring areas, gradually pushing Roman forces out of North Africa. The victory was significant not only for its military value, but also for its strategic impact, as it secured key territories and provided a solid base for further expansion. Amr's leadership and the discipline of his forces were crucial to the success of the siege. His ability to manage the logistical aspects of the siege, as well as his strategic use of military tactics, allowed the Muslims to maintain pressure on the defenders while minimizing casualties. The fall of Sufetullah was a testament to Amer's leadership and his ability to adapt to the challenges of warfare in North Africa. The battle also had broader implications for the Roman presence in the region. The loss of Sufetullah marked the weakening of Roman control over North Africa and signalled the shift of power in the region toward the Muslims. The capture of such an important city dealt a significant blow to Roman morale and their ability to resist the Muslim advance. In the aftermath of the battle, Amr ibn al-As turned his attention to securing the surrounding territories and integrating the newly conquered regions into the Muslim state. The fall of Sufetullah opened the door for further expansion into North Africa, and Amr's forces continued to press westward, securing more cities and territories. The victory at Sufetullah marked a critical phase in the Muslim conquest of North Africa. It solidified the Muslim presence in the region and paved the way for further successes in the years to come. The strategic importance of the battle, combined with its political and military significance, made it one of the key moments in the history of the Muslim expansion across the African continent. For Amr ibn al-As, the victory at Sufetullah was another step in his remarkable military career, further cementing his legacy as one of the great leaders of the early Islamic Empire. As Amr ibn al-As and his forces continued their successful conquest of North Africa, their attention was drawn to the Mediterranean Sea. The strategic importance of controlling the Mediterranean was clear. It was not only a vital trade route, but also an essential passage for military forces moving between the Islamic heartlands in the east and the newly acquired territories in North Africa. With the capture of key cities in Egypt and the successful campaigns in Libya, Tunisia and Algeria, Amr recognized that securing Muslim control over the Mediterranean would be crucial to solidifying the empire's dominance in the region. The Roman Empire had long been the dominant naval power in the Mediterranean, and although it had been weakened by the Muslim conquest of Egypt and the surrounding regions, the Romans still held strong positions along the coast of North Africa and in some of the Mediterranean islands. In order to establish full control over the region, Amr knew that it would be necessary to challenge Roman naval supremacy and secure Muslim access to the sea. Amr's first objective in the Mediterranean campaign was to disrupt Roman shipping and prevent the flow of reinforcements and supplies from Rome to their remaining strongholds in North Africa. The Romans had maintained control over several coastal cities, and these served as important hubs for their remaining power in the region. By targeting Roman vessels and coastal fortifications, Amr could weaken Roman resolve and prevent them from regaining control over their African territories. The Muslim forces, while formidable on land, had not yet developed the kind of naval power that would rival the Romans. However, Amr understood the importance of the sea and sought to build a small but effective fleet to challenge Roman dominance. He began to gather ships, both from the local coastal regions and from the wider Muslim world. These ships would be used to patrol the Mediterranean, protect Muslim-held territories, and disrupt Roman operations. The first major naval engagement came when Amr sent his fleet to intercept Roman ships trying to reinforce their positions in North Africa. The Muslim forces, using their newly acquired ships, engaged the Romans in a series of skirmishes along the coast. Though the Muslim fleet was still in its early stages and outnumbered, Amr's strategic use of tactics and the element of surprise allowed his forces to inflict significant damage on the Roman fleet. Several Roman vessels were either sunk or captured, and the morale of the Romans was dealt a serious blow. Amr's naval campaign in the Mediterranean was not only about direct confrontations with the Romans, he also aimed to cut off their supply lines, preventing reinforcements from reaching their remaining strongholds in North Africa. By disrupting Roman trade routes and blockading key ports, the Muslim forces were able to exert pressure on the Romans, forcing them to divert valuable resources away from their military efforts in the region. The success of these early naval engagements forced the Romans to reconsider their strategy in North Africa. The loss of several key naval assets and the disruption of their supply lines weakened their ability to maintain control over the Mediterranean coast. While the Romans still held several fortified positions, their ability to reinforce and resupply these outposts became increasingly difficult. Amr's leadership in the Mediterranean campaign was a testament to his adaptability and vision. He understood the strategic importance of naval power and worked tirelessly to build a fleet capable of challenging Roman dominance. His success in disrupting Roman naval operations was a significant victory in the broader context of the Muslim conquest of North Africa. It not only weakened Roman influence in the Mediterranean, but also secured Muslim control over vital maritime routes. As the war in the Mediterranean continued, Amr turned his attention to the coastal cities still under Roman control. The Muslims had already established a firm foothold in Egypt and much of North Africa, but the remaining Roman strongholds, such as Carthage, still represented a significant challenge. These cities were not only military centres, but also crucial for maintaining Roman influence in the region. Amr knew that to completely sever Roman power in North Africa, it was necessary to take these cities. The campaign in the Mediterranean was a crucial part of the broader war for North Africa, and Amr's naval operations played an essential role in weakening the Romans and forcing them to retreat from their coastal positions. As the war progressed, the Romans began to realise that they could no longer maintain their dominance in the Mediterranean, and their military focus shifted away from the sea toward more defensible positions on land. Amr's success in the Mediterranean also had long-term implications for the Muslim Empire. By securing control of the Mediterranean coast and cutting off Roman access to key supply routes, the Muslims were able to establish a stronger foothold in North Africa and expand their influence across the entire region. The strategic significance of the Mediterranean could not be overstated, and Amr's vision of controlling it helped lay the foundation for future Muslim expansion across Europe and the Mediterranean basin. The naval campaign was not without its challenges. The Muslim fleet was still small compared to the Romans, and the Romans were not easily defeated. However, Amr's ability to use the element of surprise combined with his strategic insight allowed him to exploit Roman weaknesses and disrupt their control of the Mediterranean. The success of the campaign, though not decisive in itself, was a key step in the broader Muslim conquest of North Africa, and it cemented Amr ibn al-As's role as one of the great military leaders of his time. As the Muslim forces continued to push westward, the Mediterranean would remain a critical focal point. The victory over the Roman navy and the disruption of their maritime power was a significant milestone, marking the Muslims' increasing control over the seas and their growing presence in the Mediterranean world. Amr's efforts in the Mediterranean set the stage for the continued expansion of the Islamic Empire, ensuring that the Muslims would become a dominant power in both land and sea. Amr ibn al-As, one of the greatest military leaders of the early Islamic Empire, had led successful campaigns across Egypt and North Africa. His name was etched in the history of the Muslim conquests, and his leadership had been instrumental in establishing Muslim dominance in the region. However, as the years passed, Amr's life began to take a different turn, marked by political shifts, personal reflection, and a deepening sense of the inevitable. By the time Amr reached his later years, he had grown weary from the struggles of both battle and governance. He was now in his early 70s, and the physical toll of his extensive military campaigns had started to show. Despite his advanced age, his role as the governor of Egypt remained critical, but the weariness of his long military service was becoming evident. During this period, Amr faced challenges not only from external forces, but also from internal shifts in the leadership of the Muslim Caliphate. The death of Caliph Umar and the succession of Uthman ibn Affan marked a new chapter in the history of the empire. Amr, who had served under Umar, now found himself facing the new dynamics of the administration under Uthman's reign. As a military leader and administrator, Amr was deeply invested in the future of the Muslim state, but the changing political landscape would have a significant impact on his final years. Amr had built a strong and prosperous Egypt, and he had successfully governed the region for many years. However, the transition of power from Umar to Uthman brought a different style of leadership, one that was characterized by a more centralized and at times contentious approach. Under Uthman, the empire became more tightly controlled, and political rivalries began to shape the direction of the caliphate. This shift left many of the early leaders, including Amr, questioning their place in the new order. Despite his prominent role in the early expansion of the Islamic Empire, Amr began to experience a sense of isolation. He had once been a trusted advisor and a powerful general, but as Uthman's rule unfolded, Amr found himself at odds with some of the new political realities. His involvement in the military campaigns and governance had brought him significant influence, but the changes in the political atmosphere, including growing dissatisfaction with the caliph's policies, created tensions. Amr's health also began to deteriorate. The toll of years spent on military campaigns, followed by the exhaustion of administering vast territories, had left him physically weak. His once formidable energy had waned, and his final years were marked by an increasing sense of reflection on his long career. Despite his failing health, Amr's sense of duty remained unbroken, and he continued to serve as governor, though now from a more distant and less active position. It was during this time that Amr received news that deeply troubled him. His beloved city of Fustat, which he had helped establish as the capital of Egypt, had become embroiled in political unrest. The shifting political landscape, combined with growing discontent among the people, made governance in Egypt increasingly difficult. The arrival of new political figures and the changes in the administration left Amr feeling increasingly alienated. His once unified leadership was now fractured, and his ability to manage the tensions between the different factions within Egypt became more limited. Despite these challenges, Amr remained a figure of respect among the people. He had been a leader who not only conquered and expanded the Muslim empire, but also one who sought to govern with justice and fairness. His reputation as a fair administrator and a capable military commander was well established, and even as he faced personal trials and political challenges, he continued to be respected by those who had served under him. In his final days, Amr reflected on his journey. He had risen from humble beginnings to become one of the most powerful figures in the Muslim world. His leadership had been instrumental in the conquest of Egypt, and his military prowess had played a pivotal role in the success of the Muslim empire. Yet, despite his remarkable achievements, Amr was not immune to the passage of time and the changing currents of politics. Amr's last days were marked by a deep sense of piety and reflection on his service to the caliphate. As he neared the end of his life, he turned more toward religious contemplation, seeking solace in prayer and the guidance of his faith. He was no longer the active military leader he once was, but he remained a wise and respected figure. In his final moments, he asked for the company of his family and closest companions, requesting a peaceful end after years of service. The death of Amr ibn al-As was a significant event in the history of the early Islamic Empire. His passing marked the end of an era of military conquest and expansion. Amr's legacy as a commander, governor, and statesman was deeply ingrained in the foundation of the Muslim Empire. His role in the conquest of Egypt and North Africa, as well as his contributions to the early governance of the Muslim world, remained a testament to his vision and leadership. Amr ibn al-As passed away in 43 Hijri, 664 Common Era, at the age of 73, and was buried in the city of Fustat, the capital he had helped establish. His death marked the end of a remarkable career, one that had shaped the destiny of Egypt and North Africa and contributed to the broader success of the Muslim Caliphate. His final years, though marked by political shifts and personal reflection, demonstrated the enduring strength of his character and his unwavering commitment to the Muslim cause. Though Amr had passed, his influence lived on through the legacy he left behind in Egypt and North Africa. His contributions to the expansion of the Muslim Empire and his role in establishing a stable and just governance model in the conquered territories were enduring examples of the impact that one man's leadership could have on the course of history. After Amr ibn al-As's death, the leadership of the Muslim Empire saw changes with the ascension of Muawiyah bin Abi Sufyan as the governor of Syria. This shift in power brought new developments to the governance of the broader region. However, the campaign in North Africa did not cease with Amr's passing. His successor, Muawiyah, quickly recognized the need to continue the Muslim expansion westward to further consolidate control over the vast territories of North Africa. Muawiyah's rise to prominence came with a vision for the future, particularly in securing Muslim power over the Maghreb. The Muslim Empire was still expanding, and the prospect of reinforcing their hold on North Africa became increasingly important. While the leadership in Egypt had firmly solidified, the territories to the west remained contested, with remnants of Roman and Berber resistance still posing a threat. Muawiyah, with his firm grasp on Syria and the Eastern Front, turned his attention to the Maghreb with a clear objective: to push forward with the Muslim conquest and ensure the empire's power reached as far as the Atlantic. As Muawiyah prepared for further expansion into North Africa, he recalled Abd al-Malik bin Marwan from the region, acknowledging the growing need for a steady and capable leader to push the Muslim agenda forward. Abd al-Malik, a seasoned military leader, had established a strong presence in the region and was tasked with leading the next wave of campaigns against the remaining Roman strongholds and independent Berber tribes that still occupied the northern parts of Africa. However, despite the transition in leadership, the foundation laid by Amr ibn al-As remained crucial. Amr had done much to integrate Egypt into the larger fabric of the Muslim Empire, making it a central hub for further expansions into the west. Under Amr's stewardship, Egypt had become not just a military base, but also an economic and logistical stronghold from which further conquests could be launched. The strategy to expand into the Maghreb relied on military prowess, but also on the ability to foster alliances with local populations. In his earlier campaigns, Amr had shown the effectiveness of combining military might with strategic alliances. Muawiyah, aware of the importance of consolidating power in North Africa, continued the practice of building relationships with key Berber tribes, offering them the possibility of autonomy under the umbrella of the Muslim Caliphate, which helped ensure peaceful transitions in some regions. A few years after Amr's death, the Muslim forces under Muawiyah's leadership had a firm hold on much of the region. The northern part of Africa, stretching from the Egyptian border to the Atlantic, was largely under Muslim control, but the final consolidation of power would involve defeating the remaining Roman and Berber resistance. In 664 Common Era, after Muawiyah's consolidating victory over Syria and his efforts in stabilizing the eastern provinces, his attention turned to the vast Maghreb region once again. Abd al-Malik, now tasked with overseeing further Muslim conquests, led a series of military campaigns aimed at finally breaking the resistance of the Berber tribes in the Maghreb. These campaigns would take years of strategic military action, ensuring that the remaining independent regions would submit to Muslim rule. While the Roman Empire's influence in Africa was effectively shattered, there were still remnants of Roman garrisons that needed to be dealt with. Roman outposts in what is now Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco were stubbornly resistant to Muslim advances, but the expanding Muslim forces, bolstered by their increasing naval power and seasoned generals, launched coordinated assaults that quickly overcame these holdouts. At the same time, the Berber tribes, who had been intermittently resisting Muslim rule, were now beginning to feel the full force of the Muslim military. The Berbers, who had long been independent in their mountainous and desert strongholds, began to face defeats at the hands of the well-organized Muslim forces. Some tribes, realizing the futility of their continued resistance, turned to diplomacy and offered their allegiance to the Muslim Caliphate. The region of the Maghreb, including areas like modern-day Tunisia and Morocco, began to transform under the leadership of Muawiyah and Abd al-Malik. These regions, though initially resistant, gradually became integrated into the Muslim world, bringing with them new resources, trade routes, and opportunities for further expansion. By the time Abd al-Malik's campaigns had concluded, the Muslims had firmly established themselves across the Maghreb. This period also saw the beginning of what would become a defining feature of the Muslim governance model in North Africa: the establishment of local rule under Muslim supervision. Local Berber leaders, who had once been independent rulers, now served as vassals to the Muslim Caliphate. This allowed the Muslims to maintain control over vast regions while minimizing direct conflict, thus ensuring stability in the newly conquered lands. Through Muawiyah's strategic guidance and Abd al-Malik's military leadership, the Muslim Empire solidified its hold on the Maghreb, setting the stage for the eventual spread of Islam across the western parts of Africa and into Spain. The stability brought by the Muslim forces allowed the North African regions to thrive, both economically and culturally, under Muslim rule. The Caliphate, under these leaders, became a unifying force in the region, fostering a sense of shared identity among the diverse peoples of North Africa. Muawiyah's efforts, particularly in securing the Maghreb, paved the way for future campaigns across the Mediterranean and into Spain, shaping the trajectory of Islamic expansion into Europe. The consolidation of North Africa under Muslim control was not just a military achievement, but a testament to the adaptability and vision of the early Muslim leaders, who blended military might with diplomacy, securing both territorial control and the loyalty of the local populations. The Muslim presence in North Africa was no longer just a series of fragmented territories. It was now a cohesive part of the larger Islamic empire, stretching from the Levant to the western shores of the Mediterranean and providing a foundation for future generations of Muslim leaders to build upon. With the Maghreb secured, Muawiyah and Abd al-Malik turned their sights on the next phase of expansion, with North Africa now firmly in the hands of the Muslims. Uqba bin Nafi was one of the most notable and influential commanders in the early Muslim conquests, known for his remarkable leadership and military prowess. His story is integral to the expansion of the Muslim Empire into North Africa. particularly his pivotal role in the conquest of the Maghreb. As one of the companions of the Prophet Muhammad, Uqba had earned the trust of the caliphs, and his military career exemplified both valour and determination. Uqba's journey began when he was appointed by the Caliph Umar to lead the Muslim forces into the western parts of North Africa. While his initial military engagements in the region were marked by his ability to defeat the scattered Roman and Berber forces, his leadership would be tested by the challenge of unifying and governing vast unfamiliar territories. It was Uqba's vision to extend the reach of the caliphate across the Maghreb and to solidify Muslim rule from Egypt to the Atlantic coast. Upon arriving in the Maghreb, Uqba led his forces into what is now modern-day Tunisia, taking several key cities and securing them as part of the Muslim Empire. He was determined to continue the push westward, hoping to break the last remaining resistance of the Berber tribes. His campaign was marked by both military encounters and diplomatic efforts, attempting to secure the cooperation of local Berber leaders where possible. However, some tribes fiercely resisted the Muslim advance, and Uqba's forces encountered significant opposition as they pushed deeper into the region. One of Uqba's most notable military engagements was the Battle of Carthage, where he decisively defeated the Romans. Carthage had long been a stronghold of Roman power, and its fall marked a significant milestone in the Muslim conquest of North Africa. The victory at Carthage solidified Uqba's reputation as a skilled and effective military leader. It was his aggressive strategy, combined with his tactical brilliance, that enabled him to defeat Roman forces that had once been formidable and to secure key territories for the growing Muslim Empire. After Carthage, Uqba's ambitions extended even further into the western parts of North Africa. His forces began to advance toward the Atlantic coast, reaching as far as the area of modern-day Morocco. It was during this phase of the campaign that Uqba established several new fortresses and settlements, laying the groundwork for the future expansion of the Muslim presence in North Africa. His goal was not merely to conquer, but to lay the foundations for a lasting and sustainable Muslim rule in these regions. However, Uqba's progress was not without setbacks. As he continued to push westward, he faced increased resistance from Berber tribes in the region, who viewed the Muslim forces as a new occupying power. These tribes, many of whom had previously fought against Roman rule, were unwilling to submit to the authority of the Muslims without resistance. Despite these challenges, Uqba's determination to bring the entire region under Muslim control remained unshaken. Despite Uqba's success in establishing a broad swathe of territory under Muslim control, his campaign was ultimately cut short. His push westward eventually led to a confrontation with local Berber forces, which forced him to retreat. After a series of skirmishes and negotiations with the Berber tribes, Uqba's forces found themselves in a vulnerable position. His retreat was not a complete failure, but it marked the end of his campaign to push as far as the Atlantic coast. Uqba's leadership and the campaigns he led were instrumental in setting the stage for the eventual consolidation of Muslim rule in the Maghreb. His efforts in the region were not only military in nature but also strategic, as he sought to create alliances with local leaders and establish lasting governance structures. Although his retreat marked the end of his direct involvement in the conquest of the Maghreb, his work laid the groundwork for future successes in the region. Uqba's role in the conquest of North Africa had far-reaching consequences. His leadership helped to ensure that the Muslim Empire extended its reach into the Western Mediterranean, and his early successes paved the way for the eventual conquest of Spain. His military expertise and his approach to governance shaped the future of the Maghreb, and his name would be remembered for generations as a key figure in the establishment of Muslim rule across North Africa. Though Uqba's life was cut short in terms of his campaign in the Maghreb, his legacy endured. The foundations he laid in North Africa helped ensure that future Muslim leaders, like Musa ibn Nusayr, would continue the work he had started. Uqba's efforts in the Maghreb, although faced with significant challenges, played a crucial role in the broader expansion of the Islamic Empire, and his leadership set a precedent for future campaigns in the region. Uqba bin Naf's contributions to the Muslim conquests were fundamental to the early success of the empire. His military strategies, diplomatic initiatives, and vision for the expansion of the Muslim world helped solidify Muslim control over vast territories in North Africa. His name would forever be associated with the conquest of the Maghreb and the spread of Islam across the Western Mediterranean. Following his earlier successes, Uqba bin Nafi turned his attention to the western parts of North Africa. with the goal of establishing Muslim control over the entire Maghreb region. The conquest of this area was a pivotal part of the Muslim expansion into Africa, and Uqba's leadership was crucial in pushing the boundaries of the empire further into the western Mediterranean. Uqba's invasion of the Maghreb represented a bold and ambitious move. The region, comprising modern-day Tunisia, Algeria and Morocco, was home to numerous Berber tribes that had long resisted Roman, Byzantine, and even earlier Arab influences. While some Berber tribes had already aligned themselves with the Muslim forces, others continued to oppose the advance, seeing the Muslim forces as another foreign power to resist. Uqba's campaign was defined by a series of key military engagements, marked by both successes and setbacks. His forces continued to make steady progress, overcoming resistance from Berber tribes and securing key cities. One of the most notable moments in this campaign was the fall of Carthage, the ancient Roman stronghold that had once been the centre of Roman power in North Africa. The city's conquest was not just a military victory, it represented the end of Roman influence in the region, and a clear signal that the Muslims were now the dominant power in North Africa. From Carthage, Uqba pushed further west, determined to extend Muslim control to the Atlantic Ocean. His forces marched through what is now Algeria, engaging in battles with local Berber tribes who were entrenched in their desert strongholds. The Berbers, though initially resistant, were unable to withstand the discipline and tactics of the Muslim army. Uqba's strategy of swift, well-coordinated strikes allowed the Muslim forces to maintain the upper hand, even against numerically superior opponents. One of Uqba's key strategies was to divide and conquer. He would often isolate specific Berber tribes, cutting off their access to supplies and reinforcements, and then strike decisively. His ability to maintain control over the regions he had captured, while constantly pressing forward, ensured that his campaigns continued to advance. However, despite these successes, Uqba's progress was met with strong resistance. The Berber tribes, many of whom had maintained their independence for centuries, were not willing to yield easily. They rallied under their local leaders and launched counterattacks, hoping to disrupt the Muslim advance. Uqba, however, was relentless in his efforts, pushing further into the interior of the Maghreb. As Uqba's forces advanced toward the western coast of North Africa, they faced increasingly difficult terrain and harsh conditions. The desert regions posed logistical challenges, and the Muslim forces were often stretched thin. Despite these obstacles, Uqba's leadership remained steady, and his forces continued to make progress, eventually reaching the westernmost reaches of the Maghreb. His military prowess and determination helped to solidify Muslim control over the region, ensuring that the Maghreb would become a key part of the Islamic Empire. Yet, Uqba's ambitions were ultimately cut short. His aggressive push westward toward the Atlantic brought him into conflict with local Berber leaders who were determined to preserve their independence. In one such encounter, Uqba's forces were confronted by a large coalition of Berber tribes, and despite his earlier successes, the Muslim forces were forced to retreat. The defeat marked the end of Uqba's immediate push for total control of the Maghreb, and his forces were compelled to pull back from the westernmost regions of the continent. This retreat did not mark the end of Muslim influence in the Maghreb, however. Uqba's campaigns laid the groundwork for future Muslim expansion into the region, and his efforts set the stage for later leaders to continue his work. Despite the setback, Uqba's leadership had firmly established Muslim power in much of the Maghreb, and his military actions had weakened the resistance of local Berber tribes. Uqba's invasion of the Maghreb left a lasting impact on the region. While his immediate objectives were not fully realized during his lifetime, the seeds of Muslim rule had been firmly planted. The region's eventual incorporation into the broader Islamic Empire was the result of Uqba's efforts, and his name would be remembered as one of the key figures in the early Islamic conquests of North Africa. The legacy of Uqba bin Nafi is one of determination, vision and military genius. Though he did not live to see the final unification of the Maghreb under Muslim rule, his campaigns were instrumental in shaping the future of the region. His leadership in the conquest of the Maghreb set the stage for the later success of the Muslim forces and ensured that North Africa would become an integral part of the Muslim world. Uqba bin Nafi's aggressive expansion into the western parts of North Africa marked one of the most ambitious phases of the early Muslim conquests. His military prowess and determination had earned him a prominent place in history. However, despite his earlier successes, the end of his campaign in the Maghreb came unexpectedly. As he sought to extend Muslim control further into the region, Uqba's forces met significant resistance from the Berber tribes and local leaders. This resistance, combined with strategic challenges, ultimately led to his downfall. The final moments of Uqba's campaign unfolded in a region still rich in independent tribal power. The Berber tribes of North Africa had long resisted foreign influence, whether Roman, Byzantine, or Arab. Despite Uqba's military successes in capturing key cities and fortifications, his inability to fully pacify the Berber tribes became a decisive factor in his eventual retreat. Uqba's greatest challenge came from the powerful Berber leader Qusayla, who commanded the loyalty of several significant tribes in the region. Qusayla, aware of Uqba's expansionist ambitions, rallied his forces to confront the Muslim general in what would become one of the defining moments of the campaign. The confrontation took place at the Battle of Maktar. Despite Uqba's strategic brilliance and his reputation for outmaneuvering larger forces, the battle turned against him. The Berber forces, utilizing their deep knowledge of the terrain, set ambushes and launched coordinated attacks that outpaced the Muslim forces. In the end, Uqba was forced to retreat, and the Muslim army suffered heavy losses. Following the defeat at Maktar, Uqba found himself in a precarious position. His retreat was a significant setback for the Muslim forces in North Africa, but it also marked the beginning of the end of his leadership in the region. Uqba's retreat allowed Qusayla and his allies to regroup and gain a temporary victory, preventing the complete consolidation of Muslim power in the Western Maghreb. After the defeat, Uqba was recalled to the central leadership of the Caliphate, as the political and military situation in North Africa became more complicated. His inability to fully subdue the Berber resistance and his retreat from the Western Front led to questions about his effectiveness as a leader. The growing tensions between the local Berber populations and the Muslim forces, along with the challenges of maintaining control over the vast regions Uqba had conquered, contributed to the decision to send a new leader to the region. The loss at Maktar, coupled with the shifting political realities of the Caliphate, ultimately marked the end of Uqba bin Naf's military campaigns in North Africa. His dream of fully uniting the Maghreb under Muslim rule had been thwarted by the fierce resistance of the Berber tribes and the complexity of the political landscape. Despite this, Uqba's efforts laid a foundation for future Muslim leaders to continue the expansion into the Maghreb, setting the stage for later successes in the region. Uqba's death came shortly after his retreat from the Western Front. In the years following his defeat, the Muslim leadership in North Africa faced continued challenges in maintaining control over the region. The Berber tribes, although not fully unified, had shown their ability to resist foreign rule, and the next phase of Muslim expansion in the Maghreb would require careful diplomacy and military strategy. The legacy of Uqba, however, would not be forgotten. His contributions to the early expansion of Islam in North Africa, particularly his role in establishing a Muslim presence in the region, were instrumental in the broader success of the Caliphate. Uqba's passing marked the conclusion of his direct involvement in the conquest of the Maghreb, but his influence endured. His military strategies, his ability to establish key fortifications, and his efforts to unite the Muslim forces in North Africa would continue to serve as guiding principles for future campaigns in the region. Despite the setbacks he faced, Uqba bin Naf's name remained synonymous with the early Muslim conquests of the Maghreb and the broader push for Islamic rule across North Africa. In the aftermath of Uqba's death, the Muslim forces in North Africa experienced both successes and setbacks. His successor, Musa ibn Nusayr, would build upon Uqba's foundation, continuing the struggle to fully integrate the Maghreb into the Muslim world. However, Uqba's legacy lived on in the successes of later campaigns, and the eventual conquest of Spain would owe much to the groundwork that he had laid during his time in North Africa. Uqba's vision of an expansive Muslim empire in the West, though unrealized in his lifetime, ultimately came to fruition, shaping the future of the Islamic world for centuries to come. After the setbacks faced by Uqba bin Nafi and the temporary halt to the Muslim advance into the Maghreb, the Muslim leadership recognized that the conquest of North Africa was far from complete. The region, though largely under Muslim control, still contained pockets of resistance, particularly from the Berber tribes in the western part of the continent. The unresolved issues in the region called for a renewed effort, and so the fourth invasion of Africa was launched, under the leadership of a new general, Musa ibn Nusayr. Musa ibn Nusayr, a seasoned and capable military commander, was appointed to lead the Muslim forces in a renewed campaign to bring the remaining parts of North Africa fully under the control of the Caliphate. He took over from the leadership of Uqba bin Nafi, who, despite his earlier successes, had not been able to completely pacify the region. Musa's arrival marked a critical turning point in the struggle for North Africa. He was tasked not only with securing the region, but also with stabilising the Muslim presence and reinforcing the Muslim administration in the conquered areas. Musa began his campaign by first consolidating the territories that had already been captured, ensuring that the local populations were loyal to the Muslim state. With the base of operations in Egypt and the surrounding region secure, Musa sought to push further west into the Maghreb, where the Berber resistance remained strong. He understood that to succeed, he would need to navigate the political and cultural complexities of the region, as well as manage the diverse tribes and groups that inhabited it. The first phase of the fourth invasion of Africa focused on securing the coastal cities and fortifications. While many of these cities had fallen during earlier campaigns, the Roman and Byzantine presence in the region was not entirely eradicated, and certain coastal strongholds still held out. Musa directed his forces to target these key positions, which would serve as strategic bases for further military operations. His forces launched a series of targeted attacks on these cities, each designed to isolate the remaining Roman and Berber strongholds and weaken their ability to resist the Muslim forces. As the Muslim forces advanced, they encountered various challenges. The Berber tribes, though fragmented, still managed to form strong coalitions against the invaders. Musa's forces were well organised, but the Berbers' knowledge of the terrain and their ability to mobilise quickly created difficulties for the Muslim advance. The Muslim strategy, however, relied on cutting off the Berber forces from their supply lines and capitalising on the element of surprise. Musa's forces used swift raids, siege tactics, and coordination with local allies to pressure the Berbers and force them to retreat from key positions. One of the most significant moments in this campaign was the reconquest of the city of Carthage, which had previously fallen under Roman control. The city had been a key stronghold for the Romans, and its loss would mark the final blow to any remaining Roman influence in the region. Musa's forces, well aware of the symbolic importance of Carthage, launched a major offensive to retake it. The siege was difficult, but through a combination of military pressure and strategic alliances with local tribes, the Muslims succeeded in retaking the city. This victory was a decisive moment in the fourth invasion, as it signified the collapse of the last remnants of Roman power in North Africa. With Carthage secured and the Roman defences in disarray, Musa continued to push further into the western Maghreb. The Muslim forces faced stiff resistance from Berber groups, particularly in the mountainous regions, but Musa's leadership and military experience allowed him to maintain momentum. His forces systematically conquered Berber strongholds, weakening their ability to resist the Muslim advance. At the same time, Musa worked to integrate the Berber tribes into the Muslim fold, offering terms of peace and autonomy under the umbrella of the Caliphate. This strategy helped to reduce the scale of the conflict and built a lasting base of support among some of the Berber populations. The fourth invasion also had a diplomatic component. While the military pressure was relentless, Musa understood that lasting stability in North Africa would require cooperation with the local populations. He sought to foster alliances with Berber leaders who were willing to submit to Muslim rule, offering them land and governance in return for their allegiance. This strategy of cooperation and inclusion helped to stabilise the region and ensure that the Muslim presence would be enduring. Despite the continued resistance in the region, the fourth invasion of Africa proved to be a turning point. By the end of the campaign, Musa had successfully secured the Maghreb from Egypt to the Atlantic coast. The Berber tribes, once fiercely independent, had either been subdued or brought into the Muslim fold, and the Roman influence in the region had been decisively ended. The Muslim forces had not only won military victories, but had also established a lasting governance model in North Africa, one that would serve as the foundation for further expansion into the Iberian Peninsula and beyond. The success of the fourth invasion marked a significant chapter in the history of the Muslim Empire. It solidified the Muslim presence in North Africa, paving the way for the eventual conquest of Spain and the establishment of Muslim rule in the Western Mediterranean. Musa ibn Nusayr's leadership was instrumental in this success, and his military achievements during the invasion set the stage for the continued expansion of the Caliphate in the centuries to come. The legacy of the fourth invasion of Africa would remain an essential part of the history of the Muslim Empire, and it demonstrated the enduring strength and reach of the early Muslim forces in the Mediterranean world. With the solid foundation laid by Uqba bin Nafi and the continued efforts of the Muslim forces to secure North Africa, the region saw a shift in the leadership under the new guidance of Caliph Abd al-Malik. The previous waves of conquest, under commanders like Uqba and Musa ibn Nusayr, had made significant strides in pushing the boundaries of Muslim rule into the Maghreb. Yet, the region remained fragmented, with Berber resistance still mounting sporadically. As a result, Caliph Abd al-Malik initiated the fifth invasion of Africa, aimed at consolidating Muslim control and stamping out the last pockets of opposition that persisted across the North African territories. The fifth invasion was not merely a military campaign, but also a response to internal political dynamics within the Muslim Caliphate. The new campaign was led by Hassan, a capable commander with experience in North Africa. His mission was not only to continue the expansion westward, but also to stabilize the areas where the earlier leaders had faced resistance, particularly from the Berber tribes and lingering Roman remnants. Hassan was tasked with ensuring that the Muslims would have a firm hold on the entire region, eliminating any remnants of discontent that might jeopardize the unity and control established by previous conquests. The military approach was both aggressive and strategic, with the goal of bringing in new military forces to reassert dominance over key territories, including parts of modern-day Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco. While the Muslim forces had already conquered the coastal regions and cities, the Berber tribes in the interior were less subdued, and their continued defiance was one of the most pressing challenges facing Hassan. As the fifth invasion unfolded, Hassan quickly moved westward into Tunisia, where the Roman presence had already been largely diminished, but pockets of Berber resistance remained strong. The Berber tribes had retreated to the mountainous regions, using their knowledge of the terrain to their advantage. Hassan, aware of the need to engage carefully with these forces, began by sending smaller expeditions to pressure the Berbers and attempt to isolate their stronger positions. These small-scale engagements were intended to weaken the Berber defences before the larger, more decisive battles would take place. One of the key moments of the invasion occurred when Hassan's forces came into conflict with a significant coalition of Berber tribes. The battle unfolded along the valleys and the open spaces between the Berber strongholds. The Berbers, though initially resistant, were overwhelmed by the strategic and disciplined nature of the Muslim forces. Hassan's ability to leverage both military tactics and strategic pressure allowed him to break the Berber coalition, weakening their ability to resist Muslim rule. However, as the campaign progressed, Hassan faced another significant challenge in the form of a particularly resilient Berber leader who had rallied several tribes for a counterattack. This leader, despite the tactical advantages of the Muslim forces, had been able to secure reinforcements from other Berber leaders, which temporarily halted the Muslim advance. The military engagements grew more intense as both sides tried to outmaneuver each other, with Hassan maintaining a steady offensive. It was during these campaigns that the Muslims began to see significant success. The Berbers, who had once been seen as a powerful force of resistance, were steadily losing ground due to the relentless pressure from the Muslim forces. The momentum shifted, and it became clear that the Muslim presence in North Africa was no longer under threat from the Berbers or any other resistance movements. The culmination of the fifth invasion came when the Berber leader, along with the remaining forces, was defeated decisively in the plains of the Maghreb. The victory signified the effective end of Berber resistance in the region and marked a critical milestone in the complete consolidation of Muslim control over the entire Maghreb. The fall of the last major pockets of resistance signalled the end of the widespread conflict that had marked much of the previous decades. With the defeat of the Berber forces, Hassan turned his attention to securing the conquered territories, ensuring that local governance structures were established and that the newly conquered peoples were integrated into the broader Muslim empire. The Muslim forces continued to occupy key strategic locations, including major cities and trade routes, solidifying the Caliphate's control over the region. The fifth invasion of Africa had a lasting impact on the Muslim expansion into North Africa. It was the final stage in the Muslim consolidation of power in the Maghreb. The Muslim forces, having secured vital regions from the eastern borders of Egypt to the western shores of the Maghreb, now had an uninterrupted path for further expansion into the Iberian Peninsula. With the resistance from the Berber tribes largely quelled, the Muslims were able to establish a more stable and permanent presence in the region, allowing for cultural and economic growth that would continue to flourish in the centuries to come. In the wake of the fifth invasion, the region became more integrated into the Muslim world. Trade flourished across the Mediterranean, and the region became a hub for the spread of Islamic culture and learning. The military conquests were followed by a period of consolidation, during which the Muslims established their dominance not only by force, but also by building stronger ties with the local populations. The fifth invasion of Africa, under the leadership of Hassan, proved to be a decisive chapter in the history of the Muslim Empire. It marked the end of major resistance in the Maghreb and paved the way for the eventual Muslim conquest of Spain and other parts of the Mediterranean world. The legacy of the invasion was one of strategic victories, political alliances, and the further spread of Islam in North Africa. Following the successes of the Muslim forces in the Maghreb, a new chapter in the region's history unfolded with the rise of a formidable opponent, the high priestess of the Berber tribes. This figure emerged as one of the most significant challenges to the expanding Muslim caliphate in North Africa. The high priestess, a woman of great power and influence among the Berber tribes, played a central role in the resistance against Muslim expansion. Her leadership was defined by both religious authority and strategic military prowess, making her one of the most revered and feared figures in the Maghreb during this period. The high priestess, known as a leader of the Berber resistance, sought to unify the disparate Berber tribes of the region against the Muslim forces. She wielded considerable influence, not only as a political leader, but also as a spiritual figure. Her connection to the Berber people was grounded in their long-standing traditions and beliefs, and her role as a spiritual leader made her a symbol of resistance to foreign rule. Her efforts to organize and rally the Berber tribes were based on a deep-seated desire to preserve the independence and cultural integrity of her people. As the Muslim forces advanced westward through the Maghreb, they encountered increasing resistance from the Berber tribes. Many of these tribes, though previously conquered by the Romans, found new hope in the leadership of the high priestess. Her vision for the future was one where the Berber people would remain free from outside domination, and she believed that the Muslims, like the Romans before them, posed a threat to this vision. The high priestess's strategy was one of both military resistance and spiritual leadership. She called upon the Berber tribes to unite under her banner, framing the conflict as not just a political struggle, but a religious and cultural battle for survival. Her influence over the Berber people was such that many tribes, even those who had been reluctant to engage in conflict, rallied to her cause. The resistance against the Muslims under her leadership became more organized and forceful, leading to a series of fierce battles along the borders of the Muslim-controlled territories. One of the key moments in the high priestess's campaign was her efforts to secure alliances with other regional powers, including those who had previously been in conflict with the Berbers. Her diplomatic skills were as sharp as her military strategies, and she succeeded in creating a coalition of forces that presented a significant challenge to the Muslim forces advancing through the region. However, despite her formidable leadership and the support she gathered from the Berber tribes, the high priestess faced several significant challenges. The Muslim forces, under the leadership of figures like Musa ibn Nusayr, were well organized and experienced in military campaigns across North Africa. They had already defeated numerous Berber leaders in previous encounters and had developed a reputation for relentless pressure and strategic maneuvering. The conflict between the Muslims and the Berbers under the high priestess reached its peak with a series of intense battles in the highlands and valleys of the Maghreb. The Muslim forces, while faced with difficult terrain and a determined opponent, relied on their disciplined military structure to wear down the Berber resistance. The Berber tribes, while unified under the high priestess's leadership, were still vulnerable to the well-coordinated Muslim tactics. In one of the most pivotal moments of the conflict, the high priestess led her forces into battle against the advancing Muslim armies. The clash was fierce, with the Berber warriors displaying great bravery, but ultimately, the Muslim forces emerged victorious. The defeat of the high priestess's forces marked the beginning of the end for the organized resistance in the region. Despite the loss, the high priestess's leadership left a lasting impression on the Berber people, who would continue to resist Muslim rule in various forms for many years. Following her defeat, the high priestess's influence waned, but her legacy persisted. The Berber tribes, although no longer unified under her leadership, continued to resist Muslim expansion in pockets throughout North Africa. Her efforts had delayed the full consolidation of Muslim power in the region, but the eventual Muslim victory led to the integration of the Maghreb into the larger Muslim empire. The Berber tribes, while conquered, were often granted some level of autonomy, and over time many Berber leaders chose to cooperate with the Muslim Caliphate. The story of the High Priestess is a significant chapter in the history of the Muslim conquest of North Africa. It represents the resistance of the indigenous Berber populations against foreign invaders and highlights the complexities of the cultural and political dynamics that shaped the region during this period. Her leadership and the struggle she led against the Muslims were symbolic of the broader resistance that persisted even as the Muslim forces gradually expanded across the continent. The High Priestess's legacy lived on in the continued resistance of the Berber tribes and in the way her leadership shaped the course of North African history. While the Muslims had ultimately triumphed, the memory of her struggle remained a defining feature of the Berber experience during the early years of Muslim rule in the Maghreb. Her actions would inspire future generations of Berber leaders and fighters who would continue to challenge the Muslim Empire in the centuries that followed. After the strategic successes of the previous Muslim leaders in North Africa, the conquest of the Maghreb entered a new phase under the leadership of Musa bin Nusayr. Musa was appointed by Caliph Abd al-Malik to govern the expansive regions of North Africa and to consolidate the Muslim presence in the Maghreb, a task that had proved challenging for his predecessors. His appointment came at a critical time when the Muslim forces were poised to push further west into the Maghreb, but still faced significant resistance from Berber tribes and Roman remnants. Musa bin Nusayr's military and administrative skills were well suited for the complex task that lay before him. He was no stranger to the challenges of governing newly conquered territories, having already demonstrated his capabilities in previous campaigns. His ability to blend military leadership with effective governance made him a trusted figure in the Caliphate, and his appointment to lead the Muslims in North Africa was a clear indication of the importance of the region in the broader Muslim expansion. Musa's campaign began with a thorough reassessment of the strategic situation in North Africa. The Muslim forces had already secured key coastal cities, but much of the inland regions, particularly the Berber strongholds, remained outside Muslim control. Musa recognized the importance of pacifying the Berber tribes to solidify Muslim rule in the region, and he quickly moved to establish a more permanent military and administrative presence. His first steps were to reinforce the existing Muslim garrisons and expand his forces to cover a wider area. One of Musa's first military actions was to strengthen the city of Carthage, the former Roman capital of North Africa, which had been reclaimed by the Muslims during the previous campaigns. Carthage was strategically important as it was the gateway between the eastern Mediterranean and the western parts of North Africa. Under Musa's leadership, Carthage became the centre of Muslim military operations, providing a springboard for further campaigns into the interior of the Maghreb. Despite his success in securing Carthage and other key cities, Musa faced significant challenges from the Berber tribes in the interior. The Berbers, who had long resisted foreign control, were not easily subdued. They viewed the Muslims as just another external power trying to impose its rule over their lands. To address this, Musa adopted a strategy of both military engagement and diplomacy. He engaged in battles with the Berber tribes, but he also sought to forge alliances with certain Berber leaders, offering them autonomy in exchange for loyalty to the Muslim Caliphate. This pragmatic approach allowed him to divide the Berber resistance, weakening their overall strength. Musa also turned his attention to expanding the Muslim presence further west, reaching into the area of modern-day Morocco. His forces advanced through the regions of modern-day Algeria, securing key cities and fortresses. The Berbers in these areas, though often resistant, were no match for the well-coordinated and disciplined Muslim military tactics. Musa's strategy was to create a network of fortified cities and military bases that would serve as the foundation for the lasting Muslim presence in the Maghreb. One of the most significant military achievements of Musa's campaign was the defeat of a large Berber coalition led by a prominent Berber leader. This battle, which took place in the heart of the Maghreb, was a turning point in the Muslim conquest of the region. The Muslim forces, despite being outnumbered, managed to secure a decisive victory, which effectively broke the back of the Berber resistance. Following this victory, Musa was able to push further into the western Maghreb, extending Muslim control to the Atlantic coast. Musa's military successes were followed by efforts to establish a stable administration in the newly conquered territories. He worked to integrate the Berber tribes into the Muslim governance model, offering them the opportunity to participate in the administration of the region. This helped to reduce the level of opposition to Muslim rule and allowed for a more peaceful transition in many areas. At the same time, Musa ensured that the Muslim faith and legal system were implemented throughout the Maghreb, establishing Islam as the dominant cultural and religious force in the region. Under Musa's leadership, North Africa was firmly incorporated into the Muslim Caliphate. His ability to balance military conquest with effective governance laid the groundwork for the later expansion of Muslim rule into Spain and beyond. Musa's efforts not only secured the western frontier of the Caliphate, but also paved the way for the spread of Islam across the Mediterranean and into the Iberian Peninsula. Musa's legacy in North Africa is one of both military conquest and statecraft. He succeeded in solidifying Muslim rule over a vast and diverse region, ensuring that North Africa would be a key part of the Islamic world for centuries to come. His ability to maintain control over the Berber tribes, his diplomatic efforts, and his military prowess all contributed to the long-term success of the Muslim Empire in North Africa. Musa bin Nusayr remains a central figure in the history of the early Muslim conquests, and his influence shaped the course of Islamic history in the Maghreb and beyond. As the Muslim Empire consolidated its hold over North Africa and the Western Mediterranean, it became necessary to take a step back and reflect on the broader scope of the conquest. The successes of the previous years, marked by military victories and the expansion of the Caliphate into new territories, had been impressive. However, the sheer scale of the conquest and the challenges faced in governing such vast lands required careful evaluation. The period of reflection began with the acknowledgement that the conquest of North Africa was not just about military success. It was about establishing a lasting and stable governance model. While the Muslim forces had proven their military prowess in the Maghreb, the next challenge lay in maintaining control over these newly acquired territories and integrating them into the broader Islamic state. This was a time for reassessment, not only of the military campaigns, but also of the political and social systems that would support the growing empire. One of the key figures in this period of reflection was Caliph Abd al-Malik, who had overseen much of the expansion in North Africa and had played a central role in the military campaigns. His leadership was characterized by a focus on administrative efficiency and the consolidation of power, ensuring that the Caliphate's newly conquered territories were effectively governed. Abd al-Malik recognized that the military victories were only one part of the equation. The real success of the empire depended on the ability to govern and maintain order in the vast regions that had been brought under Muslim rule. The military successes of the past decade, including the defeat of the Berber resistance and the capture of key coastal cities like Carthage, had provided a solid foundation for Muslim control over North Africa. However, the region was still politically fragmented, with local leaders holding significant power and influence. These leaders, many of whom were Berber chiefs, had accepted Muslim rule in varying degrees, but their loyalty to the Caliphate was not always guaranteed. This posed a challenge for the Muslim administration, as it required a delicate balance between military might and political diplomacy. During this pause in the campaign, there was a shift toward a more diplomatic approach to governance. The Caliphate under Abd al-Malik sought to integrate the Berber tribes and other local populations into the administrative structure of the empire. By offering certain concessions, such as autonomy in local matters and a degree of self-governance, the Caliphate aimed to foster cooperation from the Berber leaders and ensure that the region would remain loyal to the empire. This period of reflection also prompted a broader re-evaluation of the Caliphate's relationship with the Mediterranean world. The Muslim Empire had expanded rapidly into North Africa, but it was clear that the next step would involve looking to the west, toward the Iberian Peninsula and to the Mediterranean islands. The successful integration of North Africa into the Muslim world was seen as a critical step in preparing for further expansion into Europe. As the Caliphate turned its attention to these future goals, the question arose of how to manage the empire's growing reach. The rapid pace of military conquest had left little time for the Caliphate to fully address the challenges of governance in the newly conquered regions. It was clear that a pause for reflection was needed to ensure that the empire's expansion was sustainable and that its military successes were matched by effective governance and stability. This period of reflection also coincided with a deeper understanding of the importance of religious unity within the empire. Islam had been the unifying force behind the military campaigns, but as the empire expanded, there was a need to ensure that the Muslim faith remained central to the governance of the Caliphate. Abd al-Malik, recognizing the importance of religious cohesion, took steps to strengthen the role of Islam in the administration of the empire, ensuring that the Caliphate's religious principles were firmly integrated into the political and social fabric of the empire. Despite the challenges, the period of reflection was marked by a sense of optimism for the future. The Caliphate had successfully conquered vast territories, and the empire's reach now extended from the Arabian Peninsula to the western shores of North Africa. The integration of North Africa into the Muslim world was seen as a significant achievement, one that laid the groundwork for future expansion into Europe and beyond. The Muslim forces, though momentarily paused in their campaigns, were poised to take on new challenges in the years to come. As the reflection period came to an end, the Caliphate's leadership shifted its focus back to the goal of further expansion. The successes of the past had provided a strong foundation, but the future would require continued military campaigns, careful diplomacy, and effective governance. The pause in the action had allowed the Caliphate to assess its position, strengthen its administration, and prepare for the next phase of its expansion. There had been moments of pause and reflection, but the work was far from over. The conquest of North Africa had been a significant achievement, but the Muslim Empire's journey was still in its early stages. As the Caliphate looked toward the future, it was clear that the next steps would be critical in shaping the destiny of the Islamic Empire in the Mediterranean and beyond.